pursuit of greatness begins at first light and never, ever ends. Time is the enemy, the ally, and the holy grail of every race car driver. Who will be victorious? Only time will tell. Let's go.
They call this place the Green Hell. With a massive total of 170 corners and 16 plus miles of racing surface, the Nurburgring has seen a lot over the years. Each year, this massive motorsports complex has hosted some of the most challenging races in both past and modern motorsport. And today, the Major Series is ready to tackle this German circuit. Hello everyone, and welcome to iRacing's virtual Nurburgring for the 5th race of the Major Series European Region's Pro Split season, the Nurburgring 2.4, live on the Global Sim Racing channel. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside of the booth today is Peter Mackay, along with Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes is our director, Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. A lot of history has come and gone here at this facility and throughout the many turns here at the Nurburgring. Let's take a look at your GSRC track guide to learn more about today's facility.
Welcome to the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Most modern high-end series might use the GP circuit nowadays, but it will certainly never hold the respect and awe that the Northern Loop commands. Though it can be and is usually used in conjunction with the Grand Prix circuit for competitions in real life, here on iRacing, drivers can harken back to a time gone by and just run the 13-mile behemoth this place is known for. Nicknamed the Green Hell by three-time F1 world champion Sir Jackie Stewart, it is often regarded as the greatest test of a driver anywhere on the planet. Just looking at the stats will tell you why. More than 150 turns and close to 1,000 feet in elevation will pass you by in a single lap. Simply memorizing the course is half the battle for most drivers, let alone being fast. It goes without saying that this place is dangerous. Many fast corners lack runoff, there's blind apexes everywhere, and in a couple cases, even modern cars will get airborne. The list of famous turns is pretty lengthy, but some of the more notorious are places such as Flugplatz, Miss Hit Miss, Bravery Corner, and of course, the ever-iconic Carousel. It's not just the places where you've got to move the wheel that get attention too. The Dottinger Hoa stretches for more than 1.5 miles in length. While you would think this circuit would mainly be limited to the track days most gearheads flock to for a chance to lap the ring, it still sees quite a bit of wheel-to-wheel combat. The 24 Hours of the Nürburgring, the VLN Series, and the World Touring Car Championship all still take to the track to this day. Many race fans consider this the mecca of road racing, and any driver who is able to push the limits here often quickly garners their respect.
That's a look at your GSRC track guide for today's action at the Nürburgring. Now first, let's bring in my co-announcer first of all, in Peter. And Peter, when it comes to this racetrack today, a lot of challenges on hand, multi-class racing. Talk to us a little bit about your expectations for these drivers for today.
Well, as always at the Nurburgring, you are up against the ultimate challenge of any racetrack in the world. And it is really a matter of survival here at this circuit. But it's also a matter of circuit knowledge. You cannot do enough night mileage here. You've got to give the track a lot of respect, because if you take any liberty whatsoever, there is no room for error, particularly on the Nordschleife part, the road circuit part. However, on the GP section, the bit on the bottom left of the track map there, the GP section is actually a great opportunity to get some passing maneuvers done, a little bit more modern layout as well, and often refer to that as a bit of relaxation zone as well, because it's comparatively pretty straightforward compared to the Nordschleife, which is anything but.
It's going to be absolutely challenging for our competitors today, absolutely, especially since it's razor thin for some of the championship racing. Let's take a look at your points so far for the pro drivers coming into today, where Tim Claessens holds on to a 5-point advantage over Pete Herod, with Eric Mickey, George Gruber, Dallas Patasco rounding out the top 5. Very close, just 11 points separating the top 5 in the point standings entering today. Then in the sportsman side of the major series, things are also fairly tight, with Adam Fasciponti coming into today with a 50-point total. Mike Gaunt 7 points back. Tied for third is Sean Brown and Eric Freak, with Brendan Klugge and Kenneth Reeder rounding out the top 5 in the standings. In the legend standings, meanwhile, it's Richie Hearn controlling the tempo, with David Baker close behind, 8 points behind, with Ray Partridge, Bob Beltrami, Rob Gall, and Claude Belval rounding out the top 5. Belval and Gall are tied 17 points back. Then in the legend sport division, it's Colin Ward, who is currently tied at the top of the standings with Peter Dahlmeyer, with Jan Brony and Andy Banfield tied 4 points behind in second. Scott Kukaz, JD Crow, and Simon Thorns in fourth position. Then you have Hotho rounding out the top 5 in the standings entering today. Now, Christian, when it comes to the team standings, meanwhile, things have been dominated by the Grizzly TFR organizations, the Daytona and the Le Mans, leading the way in the point standings.
Yeah, no change there. Those guys still with a pretty significant advantage. Obviously, Daytona with 14 points ahead of Le Mans in the lead. Bombshell Racing Team is not too far back, 43 off the lead, with Dog Bear Europe kind of significantly back in 79 points. And then Team Mad is 5th in the pro team standings, 154 points back. But it's actually quite interesting, because then when we get to the sportsman side of things, the Missed Apex F1 podcast Team 1 with 284 points actually has more points than 5th in the pro standings, and a sizable lead in the sport team standings as well over the Hanson Brothers Racing guys. They're 38 points back. HW Racing 76 points back, with Black Tree Race Crew 115, and Grizzly TFR Daytona Jr. not having such a good time compared with their pro sister team back there in 5th, but only 1 point behind 4th.
Let's look at your standings entering today for both the drivers and the team side of things. Now, let's take a look at your details for today, as drivers are in the midst of qualifying. 4 minutes solo at the moment for the past hour or so, Peter. But these details, it's going to be multi-class racing, 3 different classes on track today.
Yeah, normally traffic at the Nürburgring is absolutely notorious, but that's when, if you go to any of the VLN races or to the 24 Hours of Nürburgring itself, you normally have about 160 cars out on circuit, and they range from a full factory Porsche GT3 car to a diesel BMW saloon car. So there is a huge variety. Today, that's not going to be such a problem. We're going to have plenty of room for the drivers to roam, so although it is a multi-class race, I do not anticipate traffic to be an issue.
Going to be an interesting one indeed for the 2.4 hours, 144 minutes we have on tap for today's action. Again, open setups for competitors today. Now, as these drivers continue to make their way around for the final moments of qualifying here, Isaac Snyder among the drivers, who are 5 total taking part in his respective class today, involving the Porsches, the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup cars. In particular, Gruber is at the bottom of the board in this grouping, with an 8:29.367. The fastest time is Dallas Pataska in class, an 8:24.195. Some pretty quick times, especially for Pataska in this class. They're looking for drivers to get a little bit more time here on the racetrack. For Joshua Wolf, a little bit more chances for at least one more lap here.
Yeah, it looks like Joshua Wolf does have an opportunity here to at least get a lap in to try and improve on his time. A big lockup there coming into that one is coming into Bergwerk, and you really got to try and get a slingshot out of there. But big lockup. Of course, this 911 GT3 Cup car does not have any anti-lock braking system on it, so if you just put in that too much brake pressure, you're you're along for the ride.
And Christian, when it comes to this racetrack, it was talked about a bit by Peter about the dangerousness of this circuit. You can just see how closely the confines are with the Armco barriers to the left and the right. You make one little mistake here as a driver, you're sliding off the racetrack.
Yeah, absolutely. It is by far one of the, if not the hardest track on iRacing, and perhaps even in the world. I actually think Bathurst might be a little bit more tricky, but it's definitely one where you're racing the track. And to be honest, when you look at pace relative to other people, it's not one where you're ever super concerned. Obviously, if you're significantly off the pace, then yeah, you know you have to find time. But I mean, even just recently in the iRacing 24-hour race around here, it was quite interesting to see how kind of once the pace had sort of figured the field out, everybody just settled into their own kind of pace, and if you caught someone in class, you kind of passed them. It was never really a battle, and the reason for that is it's just because it's so difficult, and everybody knows that you just one slight mistake, it doesn't even need to be a big mistake, just one little lockup or even just grabbing a curve a little bit wrong is going to end your day. So you don't tend to see everybody run an entire race distance around here completely flat out, because it's just not feasible. It's all about just surviving, and especially in this 911 class, where obviously the car doesn't have traction control, doesn't have ABS. It's a pretty challenging car to drive at best times. Tire management is also a big thing in this as well. Some of these guys might be kind of struggling as they get towards the end of an hour on their set of tires with this car. So it's a super challenging thing, and I'm not at all surprised to see that it's actually the least populated class here.
It's going to be interesting indeed how these drivers fare around this circuit for today. Under 4 minutes to go in qualifying, by the way, for these competitors. As we follow along with Joshua, we'd like to take the time to remind you today's charity is the CCLA for today's event. CCLA fights for civil liberties, human rights, and democratic freedoms of all people across Canada. Founded in 1964, they are an independent national non-governmental organization working in the courts, before legislative communities, in the classrooms, in the streets, protecting the dignity and rights of people in Canada. For more information, go to ccla.org. And as he makes his way down the Donninger Hoe, it's going to be interesting how the time fares up. We've already seen him have a couple lockups throughout this lap here, Peter. And right now he needs to find a way to pick up about 5 seconds to catch up to Dallas Pataska for the pole.
Yeah, this is going to be a big ask, that's for sure. We'll see what Joshua Wolf has got up his sleeve here as he comes up to Antonius Buche, going underneath the Bilstein Bridge and down towards Tiergarten, where Sabina Schmidt's family had their hotel just beside this particular part of the track. Very, very fast, right up to the very top of top gear there. Then try and get the car slowed down. Looks like it's going to be very, very tight here, actually, if Joshua Wolf's going to improve or not. Oh, it's going to be very close indeed for Joshua Wolf in the number 12 car. No, not quite. Just about 1.2 seconds off. Just shows you just one or two mistakes, and they do add up at the Nurburgring.
Indeed they do, as Isaac Snyder also is rolling still on the racetrack. This is his final lap opportunity, and for Isaac Snyder, we have an opportunity to look at Isaac Snyder as he works his way around the racetrack today. You can just see how much force feedback is bouncing his way through the corners here, and how much he's having to wheel it just in this section alone, Christian.
Yeah, this section is really, really kind of like just scary is the best way I could put it. It's always the last part of the lap where you're really kind of looking at what you, especially for qualifying, obviously you're looking for time and whatnot through there. You don't want to make a mistake through there, but obviously in the race as well, you don't want to make a mistake, and Isaac not happy with that lap, but he's got that Formula wheel there, and obviously a little less suited to the modified that he had last time, but a bit more suited to the 911 Cup.
Yeah, an interesting decision there to spin the car up to start and finish line, let's put it that way, but Pushrod Racing Machine here, one of the drivers who are currently trying to set a time at the buzzer, essentially, with under a minute to go in qualifying. Turtsindas Galindo, currently one of just 4 or 5 drivers yet to make a time here for today's action. Let's see how the 11 fares out here for this time around. Pushrod Racing Machine puts in an 8:55 flat. That's at the bottom of his class for today for the GT4s.
Oh, this is going to be very tight for Tom Dreeling. He hasn't set a fastest lap time so far. Oh, but I don't think it would be. I think it's going to be back of the pack anyway. I do like the colour scheme, though. The McLaren colours on the McLaren 570S.
And the answer to that question, no, he will not make it in time for the end of qualifying, but it's time to see how qualifying fared out for these drivers. It's time to get ready for your starting grid for today's action for the Nurburgring 2.4 for the Major Series European Region Pro Split. We'll go class by class for this action today, as starting on the front row, it's Dallas Pataska and Ross Banfield driving in the Porsches today. Then it's Isaac Snyder and Josh Wolf. George Gruber rounds out the top 5. That rounds out your first class, Peter.
In the GT4 runners, Tim Claessens has set the pace so far today by over 2 seconds from Kurt Kroom. Riley Thompson will start third of the GT4 runners, with Trevor Vavroski and Cordell Colon rounding out your 5th row and 5th overall in the GT4s. Finally, we have Travis Henderson, Ryan Mayer, Ryan Walker, Richie Hearn, Ulrich Pateklis, Aether Santos Galindo, Colin Marzov and Ray Partridge rounds out our bulging GT4 class.
And lining up on pole in the TCR class, Pete Herod with pole by just over a second from Eric Mickey, who's lining up in second alongside him. Claude Belville, and then Sam Harper, a driver who's been very impressive so far this season. He lines up in 4th. David Melneritz and Masik Sakowicz line up behind them on the next row back, with David Hitch Baker actually a little bit further back than I expected to see him, with Bob Beltrami alongside him. And then on the back row in the TCR class, we have Neil Middleton and Darwin Mites, who did not set a time.
That's look top to bottom at your running order for today's action. In-sim time is just past 8 a.m. In-sim day is June the 1st, 2021. Weather conditions very cool today. Moisture quality 63 degrees is the air temp, 64 is the track temp. It's also very windy, currently winds gusting to the southwest at 10 miles an hour. Very cool conditions to start off, Christian.
Yeah, super cold, and that's why we've got some really fast qualifying times. So obviously Tim Claessens with the GT4 pole is particularly impressive, and 8:41.5 is a really fast time for that class.
These drivers now getting ready to roll here. Keep in mind that drivers were told they should leave a 10-second gap between the classes for today's start, hence why you see the hesitation for the middle classes. But meanwhile, for the Porsches, they're getting all set to go. Your keys to victory for today, Peter.
All about survival. Be patient. Let your rivals make the mistakes. If you can run the perfect race, and whatever pace that's at, you will not be far away from the front runners. It's always incidents that take it away from you here at the Nürburgring, and if you can avoid them, you'll be up there.
All the drivers are set to go as they make their way through Tiergarten and towards the Grand Prix section of the race track. It's Dallas Pataska in control of the field. Ross Banfield to the left side of the race circuit as they make their way now to the final corner. Green flag waits up at the stand. The 2021 edition of the Nurburgring 2.4 is underway for the Major Series in its European Pro Region. The 5 drivers already fanning out a little bit into the corner. Ross Banfield being a bit defensive on Isaac Snyder, a bit of contact. Dallas Pataska, meanwhile, to the left side of the racetrack for the quick left-right as they make their way out of the arena section and off towards chicane for the Grand Prix section. A good start for Pataska. The rest of the classes now making their way through the start and finish line area to Peter.
Yeah, you've got to be super careful. Turn 1 and 2, it's a long race, but it's very, very easy to end it at that opening corner. We saw the pole sitter in the 911 Cup class at the Nurburgring 24-hour a couple of weeks ago, where Gianni Vecchio for Team Redline was taken out in the opening corner of a 24-hour race. So it can happen, but the driver's showing great respect here in the Majors Series and all getting through more or less clean there through that horribly awkward Turn 1 and 2 and onto the GP circuit they go.
Great launch for them indeed as we look at the TCRs, as currently the Team Mad Machine of Handsome Pete leads the way through there and gains a little bit of time out the corner exit. Eric Mickey still in second. Sam Harper is up to third position and a +2 for Sakowitz so far, also part of the Team Mad stable. Well, it's been an interesting start for this class so far, and you can see everyone lined up astern so far. No major mistakes from anybody in the first sector of the racetrack.
So Dallas Pataska leads it away here in the 911 Cup class and really putting the hammer down early. Of course, not much time to generate any tyre temperature as well, and these 911 Cup machines on cold tyres can be a bit of a handful, but Dallas Pataska really laying down the law as they come onto the Nordschleife proper.
Yeah, and he's out there trying to get away just so that when they get to the first significant long straight, he's hopefully out of the draft range. And you see he's pretty much got that done already, but that's going to be a factor pretty much in all of these classes, especially the TCR class. They are very, very draft dependent, and I suspect that we're going to see that class stay together for the entire race, or at least I hope that we will. And that's where pit strategy is going to be a real thing in these two secondary classes in GT4 and TCR, because there are a couple of options that you can kind of do there. In GT4, it's probably going to go out to 17 laps, so you can either do, say, you'd stretch out to 8 laps for 2 runs and then do a splash and dash for 1, or you can do, say, 7 laps and then 5, well, 2 groups of 5 and so on. In TCR, I suspect they will get lapped at least once, so their race will be 16 laps, so they should be able to make it on one single stop.
Following along right now with Kurt Crum. Meanwhile, in this train of cars, Crum has been shuffled to third off the jump. Riley Thompson was able to make the pass in the first lap so far in this run. You can just see how much Tim Class has been able to break away from the rest of the pack so far by up to 7 car lengths is the race lead.
Come through Schweidenkers into Arenberg really, really fast through there. Tell you what, the guys in the GT4 class very glad of the anti-lock braking systems in there, because you're asking an awful lot of the car. And then down the foxhole we go, or the Fuchsrohr. This actually gets to almost as quick as the end of the Dottinger hole. You can see that nearly hitting the rev limiter in the very top of 6th gear, and then hard on the brakes for Adenauer Forst.
Bit of an issue for Tom Durrell when he spun around in the 54 machine, and he's now on the side of the road, and it's caused major issues for some of the TCRs. Your race leader, Handsome Pete, is up into the Armco barrier as he may have gotten distracted by the lap car at the edge of the braking zone. Let's take a look at what happened here as this all happened. You can see Handsome Pete just misses his braking zone just after seeing the car to the left side of the racetrack.
He got pretty lucky there that he only really got a glancing blow, and you see Tom Dreiling had a huge moment. He himself was obviously very, very lucky there to not end up in the barrier. It's a super fast corner, one of those kind of critical places around the racetrack where it's very easy to make a minor mistake, and that's incredible that he actually gets away with that. That's normally a race-ending incident right there.
The endo. Handsome Pete has been shuffled back from the race lead in the TCR class, in the Audi class. And now, the race leader, Eric Mickey, followed by Sam Harper at the moment. Sam Harper +3. Then it's Sakowitz, who is up +4 so far in the race.
And we've had an incident in the 911s as well. Georg Gruber has gone around. It looked like there was some incident between himself and maybe Isaac Snyder.
And I believe so, yes indeed, and it involves significant damage to the 123. Wow.
Yeah, that's going to be a long journey back to pit lane. May have to take a toll because he's... Oh, Oh, just the slightest of contact there on the brakes coming into Bergwerk. And yeah, it looks like you'll see here, crabbing along. So that's a really, really long drag up to pit lane. And guys, do we have the option? And he is taking a toll. Do we have the option of a fast repair today?
Yes, we have one available for today's race. Incident limit is 99, but it's still going to be a ton of time lost on the racetrack, as meanwhile Ross Banfield is keeping busy, still right now trying to hold off Joshua Wolf for second position in the class.
Heading up right up to the high part of the circuit now, up to Hoa Acht as well. This is a really tough part of the track, and it's very, very easy to make a mistake here. You're just whipping back and forward, and as Christian mentioned earlier, just the slightest touch of a curb in the wrong place and you're off into the barriers. And these guys are leaving absolutely nothing on the table. But tell you what, guys, Dallas Pataska nearly 5 seconds in the lead already.
Yeah, and that's really important, just to get himself out of draft range when he gets onto the Dottinger Ho, so that he can't kind of lose any advantage he makes up in the race. But this section between what I'm going to call the big carousel and the small carousel, because I'm not that familiar with corner names around this place, is probably one of my favorite pieces of racetrack anywhere. It's so much fun. Obviously, it's very, very high risk. There's a lot of places where you can have a major incident, but if you get it right, it's so satisfying. It's honestly probably one of the best pieces of racetrack there is.
It's been a dominating start for Dallas Pataska in the class. As mentioned, nearly 6 seconds now the advantage for the Satellite Racing machine. Been able to hit his marks very precisely here as they now approach their way towards the Dodger Ho for the first time in the Porsches. Meanwhile, back in the TCRs, it's become a train of cars battling along. Class leader Eric Mickey has been able to pull away by about a second or so, but they are approaching the Dodger Ho themselves right now. One car in their class having to dodge on by will be Ryan Mayer. The 915 has had an issue. Or rather, I should say this is in the GT4 class up the road.
It looks like he's had an issue at the jump there.
And it's gotten,
Oh, unlucky though. Well, I'd say lucky. He does back it into the fence, but that could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, going through there, the Flansgarten, you've got the car really gets light, and actually the car takes off completely. And the GT4 car is just not quite as composed as a GT3 car might do. It can be a little bit more wobbly around, and yeah, just caught out Ryan Mayer slightly there. But up to Tiergarten they go, and it's Banfield versus Joshua Wolf here. Joshua Wolf up ahead, riding on board with Ross Banfield. And that's one lap complete already. These 911 Cub cars, they don't hang around.
Yeah, to give you an idea of the gaps, the TCR cars are just about to get under the Dottinger Ho now, so that's pretty much the gap that you've got from the fastest to the slowest car.
But a dicey moment there as Raleigh Thompson falls back behind Kurt Crum for position. But a shuffling there as still Tim Klassen's able to hold on by about 5 car lengths. After that run to the Dodger Ho and now down the front straightaway to end off their first lap. By the way, for your Audis, currently Pete Herrand has made his way now side by side with Claude Belval down the same section down the Dodger Ho. See a bit of drafting from some of the Team Mad machines overall as Sakowicz is also looking to make a pass on the missed Apex machine to the right side of the racetrack. Just heading off towards Tiergarten now. Sakowicz be able to complete the pass. Belval backs off in his battle. Bit more dicey with Sam Harper. Sakowicz moves up to second position.
It's always a game of chicken coming in there into Tiergarten. In fact, it was actually named after a grave that was made in honor of animals who lost their lives in battle. So it's kind of apt that you have a game of chicken there into Tiergarten, and it's just who's got the guts to keep it flat out. And it's quite common to see cars getting together there and ending up in huge accidents.
So that ends off the first lap so far in this race. The times for the top class of the Porsches: 8:28.1 for Pataska, 8:34s for the rest of the grouping. For GT4s, it was an 858 to 909 bracket to start off, where for the Audis, it was in the 944s. So we will look at Joshua Wolf right now, trying to hold on to second position. Still valuable points in line here for these drivers when you think about it, but still, this battle could go on for much of this race because these two have been fighting all season, Christian.
Yeah, and so even though there's only 5 cars in the class, I think it's actually going to push these guys to be a bit more aggressive than they might otherwise be. Obviously, if they do make a mistake, sure, they're going to lose points and they're going to lose out, but they're not going to fall down to, say, 15th place in their class. So they can afford to be pretty racy, because if it goes wrong, I mean, they can only fall as low as 5th, you know? So they've got guaranteed points on the board. Now, that said, Dallas Pataska is pretty clearly just away and gone as the race leader, so this is really a battle for second only at this point.
Key thing is for now. Meanwhile, in the GT4s, the battle for 7th position overall in the race, or 7th in the class, I should say, is heating up a little bit. As that's Udis Puteklis trying to ride along in the McLaren, leading this grouping. Ryan Walker and Sintez Galindo also in this grouping of cars.
Yeah, this is GSRC's very own Ryan Walker, the other half of Double Scotch on a Saturday afternoon here in on GSRC, and I tell you what, that new McLaren looks absolutely fantastic. A really menacing looking race car, and it just shows you how diverse the GT4 category is. How you can have a little Porsche Cayman and a McLaren supercar all racing together with the joys of the balance of performance. But Ryan Walker got problems here from Santos Galindo trying to draft by, heading up to Scheudenkers.
Yes, that's the Pushrod Racing Machine going over the jump and making his way on by for position. Making a +4 so far for the 11 machine. Solid going so far for him after missing a majority of qualifying. Stellar race so far for him so far in this one. Meanwhile, talked about some of the battles going on in for the Audis at the moment. Let's take a look at where Hanson Pete is now shuffled. He's in 4th position after being the leader in the first part of this race, trying to draft off Sam Harper as Harper misses a bit of his apex. They are closing into the overall race lead, and quickly though. Mickey's gap that was up to 5 car lengths at one point is down to just a couple, with Sakowicz providing pressure in these two, closing in quickly too.
Yeah, and I strongly suspect that these guys are just going to stay completely connected throughout the entire race. There's really nothing to suggest that they're easily separable. And obviously, Pete doing a really good job to recover from a first lap scare, because he could have ended his race right there and then. And obviously, with the class being as close as it is, recovery would have been very, very difficult for him indeed.
They're doing a phenomenal job so far, these drivers, on keeping themselves clean. No incidents in this class so far today, and no visible damage on any of the major cars here for today. Keep in mind that Claude Belval and David Monerwich are also keeping within range of these drivers within the lead draft. The rest of the pack has broken up. Falling on board with the 69 machine. You can see right now how these drivers are faring out right here. Very calm and relaxed, Peter, is Monerwich here. You can see.
I like it how he's got the Gilles Villeneuve lean on the go there. I like that a lot. You got to get some body movement into it. I like that. Yes, that's what we like to see.
Yeah, very animated up on the wheel, and it's actually really kind of interesting to see that drivers always do the lean. I don't know what it is about it, but it always just makes it feel like you're just going to somehow get a bit more capability out of the car, and you won't, but it just makes you feel better to do it.
For me, it's my tongue. My tongue is usually pointing in the direction of the corner that I want to go around.
Yeah, I totally get that. Totally understand that. It's that like trying to change like the crossweight in the car by moving your tongue position, right?
That's a motorcyclist thing. Honestly, even a motorcycle, you put it and you go, oh yeah, there we go, over to the right.
Do you ever do that during commentary where you're thinking of the corner, following along with the cars and being like, okay, they're going to the left, let's lean to the left, going to the right,
Yes,
lean to the right.
I absolutely do that, yes. I even get, particularly here at the Nurburgring, obviously, as you can see, viewers, it's very undulating, and I get my hand does a kind of like waving motion where I'm going like up and down and up and down. I need help.
By the way, following along with some of the Audis still as they draft together still, as Balval is losing a bit of touch now to the top four. He's actually lost about a second to the front four.
Yeah, and he needs to close that gap up because otherwise it's going to make him pretty much easy pickings when they get to the main straight. And the other thing is he might actually drop off the back of this grouping entirely. And honestly, you just gotta stay in the draft in this class, and that's really the only goal up until that first and only pit stop in the class. So that's really why we're seeing everybody looking relatively happy, I would say, to kind of stay in line. But it's interesting because with this car there's no wing angle adjustment, so realistically speaking everybody has the same straight line speed. It's not like the GT4 or even the 911 Cup where you can significantly impact straight line speed. A huge moment right there on the curb, but a great save.
Wow, that could have been dicey, to say the very least there. But on the bright side, they have closed up the gap a little bit in this section of the racetrack. They are approaching the major drafting section coming up in the Dodger Ho for the second time this race. Meanwhile, up front, draft is starting to come into play as Ross Banfield tries to make a pass, and they also have a pass coming from Isaac Snyder with a bit of contact. Into the grass goes Wolf, and Joshua Wolf goes from second to fourth just like that. Snyder was more than 2 seconds back the past time around.
Yeah, are we at Talladega yet? It seems like it's like a Talladega plate race with these cars. They've got such a strong draft that the Dottinger Ho makes a really big difference as Dallas Patasco lays down the law. 8:27.8. He's now 10 seconds ahead of these guys.
Yeah, that was why he was so keen to get away. You see Joshua Wolf ended up just tapping the grass right there, but able to get away with it. Coming up to the last corner, getting pretty close to that barrier on the right. So that's something that's pretty easy to do in qualifying when you're trying to get the absolute last little bit of the run down to the line. But that right there is a great example of why you do have to try and get out of the draft as quickly as possible so that you can run your own race and not kind of tow people along. See, Tim Clayson's not actually able to get out of the draft here.
Yeah, he's found a drafting buddy, essentially, that's trying to keep up with him. Kirk Crum and him have both broken away from the rest of the field, but Crum has kept up this entire pressure so far. Closed up the gap slowly but surely. Of course, the first couple laps. +1 for Kirk Crum from his starting position overall. Tim Classon's also +1 with the overall start from the overall board. Keep in mind, George Gruber is back rolling. 6 minutes and 15 seconds was his tow time. That's why it's the +1 for this class.
And Christian, what do you think? Do you think a one-stop strategy is possible for these GT4s?
I don't believe it is, as we go back to a battle for the lead in the TCR class, and once again everybody kind of side by side now in the Dottinger Ho, but doesn't look like there was any. Well, actually towards the back there's a change of position.
There's also a change for position at the front of the field. It's Sakowicz who now moves to the front of the field as the Team Mad Machine now leads. Hanson Pete was not able to move up one position in that grouping, as now Eric Mickey. Will he look for his lead back? A bit of defensive line. And Sakowicz going to the right side of the racetrack this time, a bit earlier in the brakes as well. Mickey trying to take it on the long way around, going for the switch back to the outside. Can't make it work, so Sakowicz holds on. And keep in mind, drivers were told that blocking necessarily is not allowed and defined as making a reactionary move to the car behind or by making a move more than one defensive move at a time. So you can make defensive moves, you can't make overly aggressive blocks or multiple defensive moves in a sequence.
Yeah, and I don't think it's too surprising that we see a lot of these drivers getting pretty aggressive on the GP loop. It's much easier to make passes here than it is on the old loop. But at the same time, nobody in this group is really going anywhere. Nobody's getting away. Everybody's running about the same pace. But it's pretty impressive from Sakowicz actually, because he qualified with a 9:12, so not really troubling the fastest driver in the group of Pete Harrod, who essentially ran a 9:08. But race pace really strong.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, up in front of them, we mentioned Puteklis and the McLaren, one of the newest cars in the iRacing service, Christian. Looking very sporty so far in that GT4 version.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun car. It's kind of, well, I say it's the biggest car in the class. It's not necessarily the biggest car in the class in terms of the M4. The M4 is obviously the kind of the big beast of the GT4 class, but McLaren is a significantly bigger car than the Cayman, and very, very, very sure-footed in high-speed sections and whatnot. So definitely a lot of fun to drive, and suggest someone gives it a go if they haven't already.
Doing a very solid job, have to say, Peter, in this race so far early on, but needs to find a way to pick up a bit of pace. 2 seconds off the last time by. The draft is already for Cordell Cologne upwards of about 6 seconds or so, give or take, up the track.
Yeah, they're just taking their time here, these guys, as well. And you watch Ryan Walker at the back there of this 3-car kind of breakaway, if you like. He's taking this very steady. We know Ryan is a super measured driver. We saw it at the Daytona 2.4 hour back in January in his Lamborghini, which just did not make any mistakes for the entirety of the race and really was rewarded with a good finish. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see. He's in 9th in class right now, but just he's metronomically consistent, and he's just shadowing these guys, letting them do the hard work. They're working hard in front of him, and he's just keeping it nice and smooth and tidy. So keep an eye on that car.
It's the same section before where the 11 machine tried to make a pass before and was able to succeed on Ryan Walker before, believe. Not going to be able to take a look yet as the push-rod racing machine backing up the corner this time in this grouping. And that's just the thing you have to come into grasp at with this track, where you can't send it in every possible corner here, of course, Christian. You need to find those right sections, those long straightaway sections, to be able to make a move or force someone into a mistake, especially, say, if you're in a scrap like this one, in the battle going on for 2nd overall in the race. You need to be patient.
Yeah, absolutely. The big key to this racetrack is to not try and force speed out of it. You have to kind of stay in the groove. You see Isaac Snyder maybe having a little bit of an opportunity on Banfield there. Banfield getting pretty lucky to keep that on. There's a tricky braking zone down there, but it's kind of like a very flowing racetrack as long as you stay in the groove. And that's the key to the Nurburgring, is don't kind of jump out of the groove. There's a lot of the corners are cambered favorably, but they're cambered favorably almost progressively like an oval is down towards the curbs. So you really want to get close to the curbs, but not necessarily up onto them, and let the track pull you around. And if you do that, the lap time comes kind of easily, and then it's just a matter of kind of just edging up the pace. What you can't do is you can't try and force lap time out of this track. It's just not going to end well if you try and do that.
Indeed, and you can just see, by the way, how dialed in and focused Snyder is right now, especially with the facial and expressions, trying to work his way with that Formula wheel around this racetrack.
Yeah, your concentration levels are at a heightened level at the Nurburgring, and to be honest, if they're not, you're going to be on the fence. That's just a guarantee. Yeah, if you ever want to see concentration/fear on someone's face, watch the onboard footage of Timo Bernhard breaking the lap record at the Nordschleife, 5 minutes and 19 seconds. In the Porsche 919 Evo, and there's actually a camera that faces back into Timo's. Timo's got his helmet visor up, and his eyes, honestly, his eyes are about as wide as the headlights on the front of this 911 here.
Let's see how things fare out with these cars still, as Don Dreiling, by the way, is back rolling on the racetrack. We talked about him having troubles before. It's now the last car running on the circuit. As well, there were technical issues for Darwin Mites this lap, where he's now off the circuit. 2 hours to go, even this time by on the clock, and what's been an interesting one so far for these drivers. The reset, Dallas Pataska's in the race lead by 12 seconds over on the Porsches over Ross Banfield, Isaac Snyder. Joshua Wolf rounds out the top 4 in the class. Weber's 5th in class, several seconds behind and more than a lap behind. As now Banfield tries to defend to the right side. Snyder gets the run to the left side up the Donninger Ho. Back and forth they continue to go as Snyder gets the edge this time down the straightaway as they head their way towards the final section of the racetrack.
Yeah, and that's pretty smart by this pairing there, because you can see that they're actually just starting to drop Joshua Wolf, and perhaps on the next lap by, they might actually be out of draft range for Wolf. So not a lot of sense in fighting it, especially when you know that the position is likely going to swap back and forth, just kind of on how interconnected you are. And it's pretty much the same throughout the classes.
Meanwhile, nearly into the grass that time goes Tim Glassens in this battle at the start of the Donninger Ho that time. A little bit more wider on the corner exit that time. A bit of a bobble from the 451. Spark Crum to the race lead. Now we'll have to see how Glassens now responds. He has a bit of damage, the 451 does, to the front end of his machine.
Yeah, I have to see if he's picked up significant damage, or if he's trying to do some kind of strategy play right here, because it is pretty surprising. Not to discredit anything with Kurt Crum, but Tim Glassens had a 2-second lap advantage in qualifying, and to kind of see him not able to get away from the field in the same way as, say, Dallas Pataska has in the 911 Cups is surprising. It's not what I was expecting to see. I thought he'd be able to break out of the draft and he'd be able to kind of run his own race, but it's actually turned into a 2-car battle here between himself and Kurt Crum, and Riley Thompson is not too far behind as well. He might be able to make this a 3-car fight.
2 seconds slower last time compared to last time by for these drivers. Riley Thompson 8:48.8. That's still about a second off these drivers in terms of the overall lap times. Meanwhile, in that train of Audis going on, Sam Harper and several others starting to lose touch to the top two a little bit. Hanson Pete, David Modelnirwich, Claude Belval all grouped together. That is third on back. The top two have pulled away by more than a second.
Yeah,
and I think that's enough.
Sorry, Peter.
I think that's enough to break the draft as well. It seems so for the 2 cars away up ahead as well. So for Sakowicz and Mickey, and they'll be very, very glad to see that, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of their MO, is to kind of break away from that next group of 4, and it's actually a little bit surprising that they're going to continue to fight behind, because it's only going to exaggerate that gap even further and make it harder for them to stay with the lead pair.
Move Hanson Pete up to third, a bit of near contact. Here comes the 69 now, looking to try and beat Daring. Harper backs off on the gas. Nerwich able to take advantage and jump up to 4th position, and sent it so hard and nearly spun it around, slid his way through Tiergarten that time. What a send that time from the 69. See how Sam Harper responds at a bit of a defensive move down the front straightaway, off into turns 1 and 2. Sam Harper hard to the inside, all the way off towards the side grass and white wall. Drives along the rumble strips this time, as the 69 machine able to hold on in the fight though with the switchback.
Sakowicz going past Mickey there for the lead, and this is but doing so without holding up either driver. Very, very clever to just use that draft perfectly at the end of the Dottinger Ho, and it's most important in these cars, of course. They are absolutely topped out on the Dottinger Ho as well, so Mickey maybe just wise to sit in there behind Sakowicz and continue to pull away, continue to build their gap from the next group in TCR, as we continue here this battle in GT4 with Patekalis in the McLaren getting past Aether Santos Galindo.
Let's take a look at the replay here on how this battle fared out. As you can see, Patekalis missing a bit of the apex that time, forced the side by side, and bit of near contact in this scrap a little bit, having to squeeze a little bit to hold on.
It just about held on to that right there, and more frustration for Ada, who's tried to get past Patekalis for pretty much the entire race up to this point, but just not able to clear him and get away.
But I'll tell you what, guys, I'll say it once, I'll say it again, and if call me biased, call me Scottish biased, but Ryan Walker in that 97 car, he is just keeping so comfy watching these guys knock lumps out of each other, and they're racing so close, they could easily make contact. I mean, thinking of a move at the Schweden cars, that never ends up well, and they're nearly running into the back of each other, and look how more in shape Ryan's car is, as these guys are full sideways going through Schweden cars. I think this is smart tactics from the 97 car.
Absolutely just saving and being patient amongst these drivers right now. As meanwhile, up at the very front of the field for the Audis, Sakowicz still holding on to the class lead. Eric Mickey still providing pressure. And it's the matter, though, for Sakowicz of how he handles these conditions. Keep in mind that these drivers will be approaching the midway portion of their fuel stint for this class fairly soon.
Yeah, and I'm just looking in the background, and Pete Harrod is continuing his recovery. And I don't think it's going to be too long until we see him joining this battle for the lead. But as you say, the TCR, obviously, they will be changing tires in their pit stop. They will definitely not want to run 16 laps of this track on a single set. Or at least I would think they definitely wouldn't. The fronts will be pretty unhappy. But I suspect you will see only a change of front tires for these guys when they do pit.
By the way, we're hearing the reason for Tim Klassen's having to let on by Kirk Crummett appear there was because of a potential slowdown for him at that time from the previous corners on the racetrack. So he's now trying to provide this pressure and force Crum potentially to the mistake later on in this lap. Tim Klassen's had led the opening laps for this class and had looked fairly dominant before that portion, and trouble that seen him have to back off the gas. Looking like he's got a chance to take a peek if he so chooses, instead electing to potentially bump draft here with Kirk Crum, nearly getting to the back bumper of the Bombshell Racing Team machine.
Yeah, not a passing place right there.
No, you've got to be pretty, yeah, that's a pretty bold strategy to be getting into bump drafting on the Kesselchen, because it's not really a straight, it just goes back and forward all the way up, it winds its way up the hill, and here we go to the Caracciola Carousel, named after Rudolf Caracciola, who won the first ever car race here at the Nurburgring in a Mercedes compressor. Into the carousel they go. Oh, don't pop out the side. Oh, Tim Klassen's, I don't know if he did hit the wall there, but he'll tell you what, if he didn't, he'd be very lucky.
He didn't hit the wall there, but he did hit the top of the carousel, and you can see that's what sent up nearly into the Armco.
Yeah, really, really easy to kind of just jump out of there, especially, strangely, actually in the GT4s, it's very, very challenging. I find it easier to get through there in a GT3 car than I do the GT4s, so a little bit of an interesting kind of challenge for these guys, and obviously the danger of popping out of the carousel is massive. There is a wall immediately there. The banking is helping you carry much more speed than you otherwise would be able to around that corner, so you got to be very, very careful, and there's time to be gained there for sure, and that's why everybody has to push it, but you do not want to make a mistake in that corner.
Which is still fighting, meanwhile, by the way, on the racetrack, and now some of the traffic is starting to cut its way through. That's George Gruber having to make his way on by. Lost him a bit of time overall, as you can see just up the road how dicey some of this traffic later on when the rest of the main cars start to reach their way to the back end of the Audis. Belval keeping the pressure up. And now the 69's in the grass. Major bubble. Both of them off in the grass, in fact, as they are able to save it.
Yeah, front wheel drive definitely helping him out right there, because that was the 911 Cup on the GT4. I'm pretty sure that would have probably been the end of his race, or at least the tow back to the pit lane. So you got to be very, very careful through that corner. It's one of those ones where it's not full throttle. It requires a little bit of a checkup, but it's not a big braking zone. It's just like a little bit, and that's kind of where you can easily make a mistake.
Yeah, that was a scary bobble to say the very least in that sequence. Both drivers not losing too much time in that sequence, but that could have been disastrous to say the very least.
Yeah, that's not a place where you want to go off because it's so fast. But also, I mean, there is not really anywhere around the Nordschleife where there is runoff, but there it is almost, I mean, it's barely a car's width. So as soon as you're on the grass, you're usually straight in the fence. So we've seen a number of excellent saves from these drivers in the Majors European Series so far.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, let's check back in with Snyder and Banfield as they've made their way into the Grand Prix section of the racetrack. Joshua Wolf is also still staying with this train of cars, and they've quietly been battling and shuffling we've seen so far, with the draft pulling them back and forth and side by side several times over. At this point of the race, though, Christian, what do you think's going through their minds so far? And yes, the gap is 16 seconds, but they're still fighting, as talked about, for valuable points on the racetrack as they now go their way through the chicane. A bit near contact there as Snyder had a slight technical issue. Ross Banfield nearly getting to the back end of him.
Yeah, I think these three are just so evenly matched that actually I think for Joshua Wolf, he knows that there's not really a lot of point in kind of forcing the issue here, because whoever's leading the line is just pulling everybody else along. We've seen everybody in this group be at the head of the line at some point or other, and nobody gets away from each other. So it's definitely a battle for second. For Tasker is 15 seconds ahead. He's clearly in command of the race.
Snyder's in the wall. Isaac Snyder has hit the wall. The 13 machine from second position. He's kept on going. Doesn't appear to be any cosmetic damage, but still slid off the racetrack from second position overall.
And that's exactly where I was going with this, in the sense of if you can't get away, there is no point in pushing. And obviously just a slight mistake from Isaac there. You see him just get onto the grass in that first part. Now, that seems a bit innocuous, but it gives you a clue as how hard he's pushing. And kind of throws him a bit out of line, gets into the tires there and the Armco. So he's going to have some damage on that car. It'll be interesting to see if he's actually able to keep with the other pair now.
And that's not a good place at the circuit for it to happen as well, because that's at the Hatzenbach, which is the very first section of the Nordschleife. So he's got a long way around now, but tell you what, guys, for a reasonably big hit, that car looks in very good condition actually, and steering looks okay, and he'll be able to get a repair at the next stop.
Meanwhile, Handsome Pete is now taking the race lead in the Dodger Ho with the help of his teammate, getting a major boost of draft after being able to get side by side with his fellow teammate. Then Sakowicz got into line and helped Handsome Pete take the race lead to make it a 1-2 for Team Mad. And you'll see right there is where he ducks out and starts to help out with the draft.
A pair of them actually connected up almost NASCAR style, pushing each other in to take the lead of that class, and just clearing Eric there right before the turn-in point.
And keep in mind, Team Mad is known for, in this class in particular, being one of the top organizations in sim racing when it comes to being able to race in these cars. And one of the fellow sim racing commentators in the community, and Paul Smith, also a part of that organization. That's where you see some of the logos at the back end of their machines. They do a lot of work when it comes to this class in racing, Christian.
Yeah, and obviously that's kind of showing today where they're pretty significantly, well, I'm not going to say that they're significantly out front, because obviously Eric Mickey is doing a great job of taking the fight to them, but obviously Pete had his setback at the very beginning of the race, and now it's going to be interesting to see if he can actually break away. Sakowicz is obviously doing a great job in second right now, and really locked in this battle. I think there's going to be race along with Eric Mickey here, but I want to see if Pete Harrod can actually pull away, get out of the draft, and maybe really pull out a significant lead in this class.
Yeah, I'm very curious too. Peter, your thoughts?
Well, I could echo those sentiments about Team Mad. Of course, they've got a lot of top drivers. Miguel Freitas, former SRW TCR champion, and Mark Woodhouse as well, who races for Team Mad in ARLTC and leading the AM-Class Championship there quite convincingly at the moment. So, yes, they do have a lot of top drivers, particularly, you're absolutely right, it's this car that they really specialise in.
That's in part where they're now 1-2. Sakowicz, keep in mind, a +5 from qualifying. Handsome Pete started up at the front of this class and then had a mistake on the first lap. Was shuffled back as far as 6th position working his way back to the point in the span of 3.5 laps. That, of course, already spanning to an hour and 45 minutes on the clock this time by, and you can see the distance they've built up to Mirnich, Harper, Belval and company on the racetrack. Let's take a look at the GT4s meanwhile, as they continue to shuffle around a little bit. You can see Ryan Walker has been reeled in by Richie Hearn and Ryan Mayer now, as Walker has lost a bit of touch to the cars he was up in front with. Appears to have made a bit of a mistake this lap that lost him a bit of time.
Richie's off in the barrier in the McLaren, and the yellow and black McLaren just goes off there at Kellenhard. Sorry to cut across, JP. Oh dear.
Well, that was a tough break where he cut across into the Armco indeed there and hit it with the left side of the car. Already had a bit of damage beforehand, and let's take a look at this.
This is a horrible section here. Kellenhard has got 3 kind of separate apexes there, gets them all, and then there just runs a little bit wide, carries out a little bit too much speed, and there's a barrier waiting right there for you, and the side of that McLaren looks pretty bent up. I have to say I like the livery though. It's kind of half sort of Pennzoil, half Kenny Roberts Yamaha speed block. Big props there to Richie, whoever his painter is.
I think his painter might actually be the iRacing paint shop there, but we'll have to check in with him.
Trust you to take claim for that one, Christian.
Oh, absolutely. You gotta claim all the good stuff, you know that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Meanwhile, Eric Mickey we're on board with meanwhile. As the Bombshell Racing Team machine keeping the pressure up. Mickey's done a great job this race, have to say. Has been able to hit his marks very efficiently. Has been looked very comfortable up at the front of this field today.
Yeah, and Eric Mickey's kind of is a little bit, he's got his hands full here, because when you're racing against, in a sim racing context, when you're racing against 2 teammates very close, it can be tough, because they're often working much more together than, say, if they were teammates in outdoor motorsport. In real life motorsport, usually you're trying to bury your teammate, you're trying to make sure that you're ahead of them, whereas in sim racing it can be a lot more collaborative, and that's what Eric Mickey's up against here, but doing a super job.
Yeah, for sure, these guys are going to be chatting to each other. And the other thing about that as well is obviously it's a fairly simple strategy race with the TCR cars, but there's still an element of keeping an eye on obviously fuel usage and whatnot, and having 2 times the information is never a bad thing, you know.
Absolutely. As Banfield now holding on to second position, does have a bit of damage now on the right front, it appears now on his machine. That may have been occurred during this lap potentially. See how it hampers him, or if it affects that 777. Keep in mind, as talked about, there is a faster pair available in the pits, and that's going to be one of the major benefits, where you have that option, if you so choose, to be able to utilize it on the first pit stop, possibly for this race if you got that damage. Snyder has come into the pit lane, by the way, after his hit to the wall in Sector 1 at the start of this lap.
Yeah, he's electing to take a pit stop pretty early on and just get that car fixed. He was scored 37 seconds behind the leader before he came into pit road, so he'd lost near enough 15 to 20 seconds compared to Banfield and Wolf after that incident, so obviously hurt him quite a lot, but a good job to get it back around. And I don't think he's out of this race by any means, because that class was always going to have to make 2 stops anyway by my numbers, so it's not over for him.
No, definitely not. It's having that he has that flexibility in the strategy, has Isaac Snyder, and he's absolutely not out of this at all. It's more of, I think if you have an incident that's so bad that you have to tow back, I think that's when you drop yourself out of contention.
Tim Claessens, meanwhile, has jumped up in front, and the pit window appears to be open as well for this class, as Kurt Crum is elected to come in this time by on lap 5.
Yeah, looks like he might be trying to run the race in reverse, because there is kind of 2 strategies available for GT4s here. It's pretty much you can either do, say, 8 laps and 8 laps by saving some fuel a little bit and then doing a 1-lap dash at the end, or you can really split it up and do, say, 7 laps and then two runs of 5. And it looks like he's actually elected to do a run of 5 at the beginning of the race. So I wonder if he's short fueled a little bit, because that's going to be a quite significant disadvantage to him, actually, because obviously everybody can start with a full tank of gas, but if he didn't, then he's going to have to add in more proportionally compared with everybody else over the course of the race. So he's going to lose out some significant time to Tim Claeson's. Whether it drops him back behind, say, Riley Thompson or not, we'll just have to see.
Absolutely. As meanwhile, the two drivers who just passed him, Trevor Bobrovsky, Travis Henderson, both of them have quietly had a very quiet race so far, Christian. But both of them have been consistently hitting their marks as well. By the way, Richie Hearn has also come in this lap, Christian.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised to see Richie pit in. Obviously, after getting into the barrier, it's not going to be a good deal for him there. He already had some damage, so now probably going to use that fast repair. I'll have to see if it kind of jumps back out as he comes into the box. There you go, there it does. So he's now kind of under the gun because he's got to complete the entire rest of the race without a significant incident. Otherwise, it's pretty much going to be a DNF for him. It's totally reasonable for this class, though, to be pitting about 5 laps into the race. So strategy-wise, it's not a big deal to them, but definitely losing the free repair is not what you want with an hour and 40 minutes to go.
Meanwhile, Ryan Mayer is keeping up the pressure on Ryan Walker. It's the battle of the Ryans at the moment, as the Satellite Racing machine in front, the Bombshell Racing Team machine behind. They are slowly reeling back in the 11 machine now as well in this fight for position.
Yeah, whilst this is going on, we had the battle of the TCRs again down the Dottinger Hoe. This time, the Team Mad Cars successfully executed the strategies to retain the lead. They just kind of left Eric out there on his own, and he wasn't able to make anything happen. You see him trying to get by the pairing of cars all by himself, and it's just not going to happen for him. He might have been able to get by one of them, but elected to back out in the move late on.
There was actually a decent slam of a bump draft there from Sakowicz, should be worth mentioning, though, down that straightaway with how hard he pushed. No damage for those cars. They're lucky, yes, but as talked about, these cars can take a bit of damage.
Yeah, TCR is quite a robust car just by its nature. Obviously, it's a touring car class, and well, we know that they like to kind of get into each other a fair bit, so the car's pretty strong and can take a decent bit of contact, such as bump drafting or whatnot, without any significant performance disadvantage from it.
Indeed. These top three have all grouped together. Sam Harper is meanwhile grouped up in the next grouping behind. It's been an interesting race so far, Peter. Your thoughts on how things have played out so far as we're approaching already nearly an hour into the action?
Yeah, I'm very impressed with how flawless the guys have been on the most part. Normally you see a much higher attrition rate than this at the Nurburgring Nordschleife. So really impressed, and I think you driver of the day so far. I mean, Dallas Pataska has been imperious in that GT3 machine, but Pete, I tell you what, you've got to be impressed with Pete Harrod, because was dropped quite far down the order with a little mistake early on, and he's fought back really well, and looks like he's going to lead that class into the pit stops.
Keep in mind, Kirk Crum had already come in for his pit stop as talked about before, and now it gets interesting on how things play out for Crum. He's cycled right behind that battle we were following with Walker and Mayer, keep in mind. And that battle with Walker and Mayer has been reeling in the 11 machine in bunches this lap.
Yeah, this is really not good for Kurt Crum, obviously having to clear significant cars. His teammate is apparently letting him go right here. You see a flash of the brake lights. That's, if you're not on the Discord or TeamSpeak with somebody, that's pretty much your method of communication to let them know that you're going to let them by. But this is still not great for him. Obviously, he's got to pass Ryan Walker, and he's going to lose time during all of this segment. So, in terms of his battle with Tim Claeson's, I think that the advantage has definitely shifted towards Claeson's at this point.
Potentially, absolutely. Tim Claeson's right now, last time by, turned an 8:45. That was... Oh, and one car is off. That's Isaac Snyder behind him, who's had more trouble.
Oh, that's not good news.
Riley Thompson will pass on by as... Wow.
Oh, this is fast down here. Really fast. coming through the Kesselchen as well and just trying to... Oh, I don't know if Tim Claessens actually saw him.
Well, what it is through there is it's not actually a trivial kind of corner for a GT4, so you do kind of naturally run out a little bit, but that actually happened to me, not the spin, but getting out onto the grass there in the 24-hour race here recently, where you get caught out by how quickly the track cuts back, and it really comes as a surprise to you. And obviously, whoa, Isaac with a huge moment on the exit of the carousel as well. This time backs it into the fence. This is definitely a lap to forget for him right here as he then gets into the barrier on exit as well.
And that one definitely gives some damage as well from that hard hit to the Armco barriers on the right front in particular. It's not been a pretty lap, absolutely, as he nearly flipped it over coming out of the carousel.
Yeah, that's a pretty violent incident there for Isaac Snyder, and I wonder, he seems to be carrying on okay, but I wonder if he'll have to come back into pit lane again for repairs.
Meanwhile, let's check back in with the Audis at the moment, as currently Mickey we're falling on board with. Bit of a harder break that time, a bit more deeper, providing a ton of pressure to Sakowicz as they start to make their way through Sector 2.
Losing out a little bit right there. You see Sakowicz is just dropping a little bit away from Pete at this point, but he's going to pull this back up down the straight, so really no need for anybody to kind of be pushing in this group. Pete hasn't got the advantage he would need to be out of draft range, and everybody behind kind of knows that, so there's not much point in really going all out, either necessarily trying to catch up or in Pete's case trying to escape, because the gap's just not big enough.
Yeah, it's just back into that rhythm portion of the race essentially for these drivers. Have to see how they fare out in this grouping for these respective competitors so far. It's been an interesting one for these drivers, to say the very least. By the way, the second pack, Sam Harper has broken away from the second pack.
That's quite a big development for Sam Harper to be able to break away from a TCR pack. You've got to have a significant pace advantage, but this is a really great opportunity for the 52 car, the Missed Apex F1 podcast machine. And although he's just looking at Sam Harper, he's got about 7 seconds to get up to Eric Mickey in third, but being in clear air, certainly a good way to do that.
Indeed, and the interesting thing when it comes to the Missed Apex podcast car today is on their front hood they have Brawn but first. Not the best advice for journalism in journalism school, have to say, the very least, but I'm guessing that's more reference of they may take the corner on, but they're usually first in a pack. By the way, having fun, Trevor and Travis, Peter.
Yeah, they look like they're having a whale of a time in these beautiful blue and silver TFR machines. One of my favourite liveries in the major series right now. And having two teammates to work together along the Nordschleife are very, very helpful. There's a lot of, particularly in these GT4 machines, there's a lot of full throttle stretches. So if you can help to pull each other along, even if one of you is slightly faster, just showing the way can be helpful. Can be helpful too. So, and you can see they're not separated by much at all in terms of lap time.
Yeah, this pairing really kind of in no man's land at this point. Got about 10 to 12 seconds to the grouping ahead of them, and then 18 seconds behind. So, just not fighting anybody at all.
Speaking of fighting still, Wonker and Mayer are still fighting, and they have gone within drafting distance now of the 11 machine. Kirk Crum has made his way by these machines, so now it's going to be interesting. Mayer did pit this lap, by the way. That's why you only see Walker here now in this grouping.
Yeah, Mayer back to Walker and then just ducked straight into the pit lane as he did so. That's still a little bit early, I would say.
Does have a bit of damage. He's electing to keep the faster pair, it looks like.
Yeah, if you can avoid not using it, it's if you can put up with whatever damage you've got, it always helps to have that fast repair in reserve, because you never know when you might need it later on. And once you've used it, then you've definitely driving with a little bit more of a margin once that fast repair is gone.
Over in the Dodger home, meanwhile, Handsome Pete, with that big margin he built up in the main technical portions of the racetrack, now getting the major bump now from Sakowicz this time, and they have now broken away just about from Eric Mickey. That's how big the tow has now been for the Team Mad Cars, who are 1-2 at the moment. Mickey's still able to keep up by about 7 car lengths or so, but those cars are definitely hooked up and definitely being able to work together, dial it in at the front of the pack.
If you're Eric Mickey, that must have been incredibly frustrating watching that happening, because there's a perfect example of being outnumbered in a sim racing context. When you've got 2 drivers in another team, that wouldn't happen normally. And whoa, that's a massive accident at Tiergarten.
Oh, and that's Claude Belval that makes that mistake there, side by side with Nurburgring. That was, again, going on for 4th position before Belval went off into the grass with the left side tires in the side-by-side.
We got a help here as well, because that seemed to happen very, very violently, very, very quickly. Up into Tiergarten they go. I think it might well be... No, gets on the grass. Oh, dear. Oh, that's a really frustrating error. Close to the pit lane, though. If he can limp that car back to pit lane, then might get away with it. Yes, he managed to get it back to pit lane. Yeah,
but it doesn't actually look like he's had the fast repair selected, because his car is still significantly damaged, and if he's forgotten to do that, then that's pretty much ending his race right there and then. But that's the danger of Tiergarten. It's just so unforgiving if you get it wrong, and obviously right at the end of the lap, pretty much the highest speed that you're going to see as well. So
I believe it was a tow there in that sequence there, guys. That's the reason he didn't get the repair, and that's going to cost him a decent bit of time. Not as much compared to, say, if it was at the end of the racetrack, but it's still going to cost him a ton of time and potentially a lot of valuable positions. David H. Baker, by the way, came in that lap as well.
Wow, that's frustrating. That's really frustrating, being 300 or 400 meters from the entry to pit road, and you have to take a tow. So he must have blown his engine. He must have had no drive to be able to do it. I mean, it was a huge hit.
Baker, by the way, is out of the pit lane. 33 seconds in the stall, off and away. Currently running now 8th in class. We'll see how things cycle for him now as the window is open now for the Audis on the racetrack.
So the Team Mad Steamroller continues to go on. Pete Hard, it's interesting, he hasn't pulled away. He's obviously had a lot more pace than his rivals, being able to recover from that mistake earlier on, but maybe just certainly giving his teammate Maciek Sakowicz a really good tow along right now, but Eric Mickey's keeping them honest.
Yeah, he's been doing a very impressive job here, Christian, to say the very least, to keep within range and keep the pressure up. It's been a very impressive run for Eric Mickey, and he's had some very impressive races this season overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's obviously keeping with this pairing, and he is disadvantaged. He's going to find it very, very difficult to execute a pass. Obviously, he's not going to have any help at all in terms of drafting and whatnot from this group. But if he can just stay with them, and there might be an opportunity towards the end of the race. At the very least, he's on course for a pretty impressive podium here to keep up with these guys. And honestly, the entire TCR class is still pretty tightly packed. Obviously, we've got this group of 3 who are out front at the moment, but Sam Harper is not that far behind. He's only 8 seconds behind this group.
Yeah, Sam Harper also doing a fairly impressive job here today. Keep in mind, Sam Harper and the rest of the other drivers do not have draft to factor in for their respective groupings right now. By the way, Dallas Pataska is now into the pit lane as the window is opened up for the rest of the Porsches. So the top class in terms of the pace today, now having pit stops this lap. Dallas Pataska in for his scheduled pit stop.
Yeah, pretty big advantage as well. He's about 26 seconds in the lead at this point.
And for Dallas Pataska here, he can take. He's got enough time in hand where he could take an extra set of tires if he wanted to. Doesn't need to, but he can because he's built up that advantage. But make no mistake, you cannot lift off for 1 second in this 911 GT3 Cup car. If you just let the concentration dip, it will bite you, particularly at the circuit.
Pataska will take tires in this sequence as Ross Banfield, you also seen followed with Joshua Wolf into the lane. Banfield appears electing not to get the damage repaired quite yet on his machine. May get it done manually, I should rather say. We'll see how things fare out for the rest of the stop here as Pataska ready to come off the jacks any moment. Now as he gets ready to rev that engine, more than a minute 2 seconds in the pit box, and the rest of the drivers behind appear to also will be taking tires this sequence.
And I think that honestly makes sense with in terms of how the race is going to run out, or over an hour in at this point. So you might as well actually take the tires just to be safe, because even if you're not going to take tires on your last stop, which will be a shorter run to the end of the race, it still makes sense to do it now, just so that you've kind of got that knowledge. I've seen a couple of drivers maybe in the past try and do something where they try and kind of guesstimate how many laps are going to be left, and they'll take 2 to 3 laps of fuel at this point and try and run the old tires, and it tends to not work out that great. So makes sense to take tires now and full tank of gas, and then work out what you've got to do at the end of the race.
So Pataska after that still holds on to a 26-second lead. Tim Claessens, by the way, has ducked in for his scheduled stop now as well in the 451 machine. So windows open now for the GT4s as well in the racetrack. Let's take a look at Claessens now as he rumbles his way down the pit lane. Riley Thompson's at the other end of the lane in the TDR machine. You can see just how to smoothly make his way to the pit box, and keep in mind we were talking about this. Fuel and tires simultaneously change here on iRacing for these cars. Christian.
Yeah, so definitely all the GT4s will be taking tires and fuel at the same time. Now, the interesting thing is going to be what they choose to do for this last part of the race, because if they take a full tank of fuel, then it will elongate the pit stop out comparative to say the tires. Now, what they can do is they can say run 7 laps like you have, and then they can fill just a little bit more than the amount of time it takes to change tires and run 5 laps. Then they can do that next 5-lap run again to the end of the race. And personally, that's my opinion of what the optimum strategy for this class is. So it'll be interesting to see. Looks like Tim Claessens isn't doing that because he's still filling up with fuel even after he's dropped off the jacks. Riley Thompson, on the other hand, has done that strategy that I was talking about, I believe, where he's had a significantly shorter pit stop now. You see about 11 seconds. He's taken the lead of the race. He will have to kind of give that time back because he will obviously have to fill more fuel at some point, but it comes down to whether when Tim pits, he takes tires or not in that last stop, because that, I think, is going to be the only way he's going to be able to get that time back.
And the rest of the pack has also come in for their scheduled stops, by the way, for their respective service. And the interesting thing, too, by the way, the driver who is cycled to the class lead is Kirk Crum net lead, I should rather say, as Travis Henderson had previously also not come in for service yet in that respective class. So it's going to get interesting now in the respective class now, things have shaken up here for these drivers. All sorts of strategies now, Peter, in this class.
Yeah, it's intriguing to watch, actually, with these GT4 machines, what to do. Of course, it does change things up a bit, being able to take tires while taking fuel. Of course, that's not the case with some of the other classes where you have to choose, you have to choose afterwards if you're going to invest that time in putting the tires on once the fuel is finished. So you have to give up the time in the pits, if you like, whereas with the GT4 you don't. So it's going to be fascinating to see. I quite like Tim Claessen's idea where he's going to go full run and then maybe have enough time in the pit lane when he's fueling up next time to put tires on. We'll see. We'll see how that one works out.
Looking back now at the Audis as they now fight, and Eric Mickey may get the chance to break up the teammates, possibly. No, elects to back up and allow them to sort back out. Now wanting to take it side by side into Tiergarten that time. They'll approach their 7th time around, this time by approaching the start of their 8th lap as Mickey's elected to go for the undercut. Mickey's coming in this time by.
I don't think that's going to work for him, though, because I'm pretty certain that the TCR strategy is it's a 16-lap race for these guys, and if they can make it out to 8 laps each time, they'll cut a pit stop out. So Eric Mickey's now at a massive disadvantage. He's going to have to stop at least one more time because at minimum the TCRs are going to run 16 laps. And I don't see how he's going to manage to try and stretch out 9 laps on fuel if he wasn't able to do 8.
Yeah, this is going to be intriguing absolutely now for this respective decision. Is taking tires here as well. You can see him up on the jacks already here in his Audi.
Got a significant amount of droop on the suspension in that thing.
Yep.
On the bright side, he's back on the ground. And they expect the strategy again is this time by the next 9 minutes or so for these drivers here. So we're going to have to see how things cycle out now with Eric Mickey. He took a 37-second pit stop.
And well, we'll see what he's planning. I think I have to agree. I think it's a strange decision there from Eric Mickey because he looked pretty comfortable behind these two Team Mad cars, who, although they're kind of helping one another out, actually they weren't really hindering Eric Mickey that much. And latterly, Eric was able to sit there kind of in their tow. But could be a quick lap now though for these Team Mad cars because they'll be on very low fuel. The tires will still be in pretty reasonable condition, I would imagine. So this could be quick, especially with them running in flying formation. I'm sure their in-house cinematographer will be getting some good promo shots right now.
You gotta love those promo shots sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For the annual calendar.
Indeed. You have to say, though, when it comes to the visuals here on iRacing, they've come a long way, Christian, especially in the past few years with the many different options from the f-stops to being able to manual focus to a lot of the different settings you can do to make lots of beautiful sim photos. There's a reason the sim photography community is so big on iRacing.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's a lot of options available in the camera tools, and I know people can kind of do their own sort of post editing sort of deal, which obviously makes them look even better than they already do. But for sure, when you kind of look at photos of the sim in its past history, even say 5-6 years ago, obviously because you kind of hear every day, you don't necessarily notice that it progresses forwards to the kind of the extent that it does, because if you then take kind of a snapshot back in time, you'll realize it looks significantly better now than it did even say 5-6 years ago.
Very beautiful, to say the very least, the scenes here today. Even with the clouds that are still above the racetrack, by the way, 67 degrees is now your track temp Fahrenheit at the moment. 64 is your air temp. The winds have calmed down a touch bit. By the way, Riley Thompson, Tim Claessens, still butting up against one another for position. The fastest lap for Riley Thompson, more than 2 seconds off Tim Claessens. But it's going to be interesting how things play out with the strategy. You can see a major amount of send that time for Claessens, way further back in the braking zone as Thompson that corner, Christian.
Yeah, big dive there. And just taking a look at the difference in pit lane time. So Riley Thompson, 1 minute and 5 seconds. Tim Claessens, 1 minute and 17 seconds. So 12-second difference there. And obviously that facilitated a change in the effective lead of the class. It's going to be intriguing to see what the lane time is for Tim on his next time down, because I think that if he elects to take tires, this is just a no-win situation for him, because what's happened to him here is he was up on the jacks taking a full tank of gas and tires, and the tires were obviously significantly done before the fuel was done, so that's why his stop is 12 seconds longer. Riley, on the other hand, filled only the amount that he could whilst the tire change was happening. So Tim now probably actually will be done on fueling if he takes tires again. If he takes tires again, he'll be done on fueling before the tires are complete. So then he'll be waiting on the tires, unless he doesn't take tires, which is possible. But I just don't see how it was better than what Riley's doing. But we'll have to find out.
Of course, for Riley as well, he'll be running a lighter car at the moment as well. If he's only taking a portion of fuel, well, he's taking a partial fill, and Tim Claessens is taking a full fill, that's surely going to affect straight line speed at least.
Yeah, it probably would if they weren't kind of locked together. Obviously, if Riley was kind of out there on his own, it would give him a little bit of a pace advantage for sure. But Tim's negating that by being in his draft. And honestly, Tim definitely looks the class of the field in terms of raw pace. So we'll have to see if he can overcome this deficit. And actually to see if it isn't a deficit at all. I could be totally wrong, but I think he's put himself back with this strategy call.
We'll have to wait and see, since we're under 10 estimated laps to go, coming up to 9 estimated laps to go this time by. We're approaching 1 hour to go, already at the halfway mark this minute or so for our competitors as they reach the Dodger Ho this time by. Team Mad Cars, by the way, still chugging their way along their way towards the carousel this time by. For the GT4s, by the way, Tim Claessens is now side by side with Riley Thompson. Here comes the 451, back for the class lead, takes it away from Thompson.
Yeah, good move there from Tim Claessens. No risk at all, really does it very nice and clean, and leads into the tier garden without too much heroics. And now we'll see, this is going to be tough for Riley Thompson. He's got to try and hang on to the back of Tim Claessens as best as he possibly can, but that's going to be a big ask for the 58 car.
Let's follow along with Tim Claessens. And Peter, one of the main skill sets you have is you know every single corner name here. Let's take it to the test.
Let's take a tour. Yeah, what a great ring taxi driver. What a better ring taxi driver could we have than Tim Claessens. Let's go on a lap of the combined Nurburgring Nordschleife. So we're on the GP circuit at the moment, which is very much, I would call this the relaxation zone. This is where you're on a big modern GP circuit, lots of runoff, as you can see. If you make a mistake, it's not the end of your race necessarily. So this is where the drivers can be a little bit more relaxed. However, if you're in a wheel-to-wheel battle, well, then this is also where you are more vulnerable to be overtaken as well. But don't know if Tim Claessens is so concerned about that. He's thinking ahead as we head up the hill towards the Michael Schumacher S's, named after the great man himself, one of the greatest racing drivers of all time. And what a great section it is. In these GT4 cars, you're really using all the curb as much as you can. Up towards the Hatzenbach box right now, as you can use a lot of curb on the left-hand side. There you go. You can see Tim Claessens using as much as possible. Then we head up to the final part of the GP circuit, heading up the hill towards the NGK chicane, and then onto the Nürburgring Nordschleife proper, the most infamous stretch of tarmac anywhere in the world, or in any racetrack in the world at least. Back a couple of gears here through the NGK chicane here, it's very easy to pick up an off-track incident point there. Now here we go. Now you tighten up your virtual belts and onto the Hatzenbach here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. A very tricky left-hander here down towards Hatzenbach, and you build an awful lot of speed down this very much a helter-skelter section here. You can see how much Tim Claessens is using the road, and look at how much bumping and barging. The suspension gets a real workout through here. Tim Claessens appeared to be running his car quite soft, it would appear, onto Hocheiken. This is a really tricky part because you can take the curb, but you've got to be very careful what part to take it. Hocheiken, very important indeed, because you want to get a good exit out of this right-left chicane section here and onto the Quiddelbacher Ho, which is named after the village of Quiddelbach, and then up towards one of the most distinctive parts of the Nordschleife, the Flugplatz. And Flug stands for flight. There you go. Whoa, over the crest of the hill we go, keeping the steering as nice and steady as you can, then hard on the power down towards Schweidenkurs. This is a 6th gear almost flat out corner here. It's a blind entry, left-hander, over the crest we go. Here it comes. Schwedenkerger, hang on for dear life. Maybe cut a bit over the curb there. Car actually gets very, very light, and then hard on the brakes for Arenberg, which is, you can see it's slightly cambered there as well, and then hard on the power again down towards Fuchsrohe, or the Foxhole if you prefer. And this part of the circuit as fast as the end of the Dottinger hose. You can see Tim Klassen's here up to the top part of 6th gear in his Porsche Cayman, using every last one of those 425 horsepower up into Adenauer Force. Look at all that runoff on the left. Look at that. You can have a game of football on the left there. Massive runoff there at Adenauer Force, and then straight away narrows back up again. Now on the run, this is very important to get a good exit there out of Adenauer Force down towards Metzgesfeld. Now, if this was a rally track, which is almost a bit what the Nurburgring Nordschleife is like, it would have don't cut on your nose, because if you do cut Metzgesfeld there, you hit the curb and you're in the fence. Not what you want to be doing. Now over down towards Kellenhard. This is a really, really tricky section of the circuit. You've kind of got this off camber double right-hander here, and then hard on the power, flat out left-hander here, and then towards Kellenhard. There's 3 apexes here. Ready to count them? Ready? On your right. 1, 2, 3. There we go. And then down towards Merseifen as well. It's kind of like a pig's tail, this corner. Really winds back forward. We're going to go right back on ourselves. There we go. And then down towards the bridge before X-Mule. Really fast part of the circuit again here, up to 5th gear, back a couple of gears, hard tuck it into the apex there, watch the wall on the right hand side, and then X-Mule, right-hander, up the hill here as well, letting the car run out, but not too much, up the hill, using all the power that you've got on towards Niki Lauda Memorial Corner. This left-hander here, absolutely flat out, down towards the most important corner on the circuit, which is Bergwerk, because you need to get a very strong exit out of here, carrying as much speed up onto Kesselchen. Now, I was going to call it the Kesselchen straight there, but as you can see, it's not a straight, but is flat out all the way up this hill here. Good opportunity to try and draft the car. You can actually see Riley Thompson mirroring in the back, stalking away in the left-hand mirror there of Tim Klessen's Porsche, up towards the Klostertal section. This is where you need very, very big guts, because there is a super quick left-hander coming up. Ready? Take a deep breath. Please hold on. Please grip. Please grip. Oh, beautiful. Tim Klessen's absolutely no drama whatsoever. So we head up towards the final part of Klostertal, and then we'll have this very tight right-hander and the climb up to the Caracciola Carousel, named after Rudolf Caracciola, who won the first ever car race here at the Nürburgring in a compressor Mercedes. The most recognisable part of the circuit here, we saw Tim Klessen's pop out of this cambered part of the circuit before. Hang on, he's nearly done it again, over the curb. Oh my goodness me, well held there from Tim Klessen's, nearly made the same mistake twice. Up the hill he goes then to Hoheacht, the highest point on the circuit here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, named after the highest part of the Eifel region, the Hoheacht, and then over towards Wipperman now. Easy way to remember it, the car whips back and forward here. It's very, very fast S's here. You can see it just right, then left, 4th gear, very, very quick through Wipperman, and then we'll be heading up towards Esbach. This is where the fans start to turn up now as well. Hopefully we'll get them at the Nürburgring 24-hour in about 4 weeks time. Keep our fingers crossed through the double left-hander of Esbach. All the fans here on the left-hand side, and then up towards Brünchen. You want to use a lot of room on the entry of the corner, but watch for the exit. There's a gravel trap. Where did that come from? On the left-hand side, up towards Ice Corner now. Actually quite grippy, surprisingly. Up onto the curb we go, and down towards Pflanzgarten. This is where the car can get very out of shape, because there's a big dip here, as you can see. Off the edge of the cliff we go. Whoop! And down we go. Very nice and composed there from Tim Klessen's. Then towards the Stefan Beloff S's, named after the immortal lap record holder of the Nordschleife, Stefan Beloff, who set the lap record here, 6 minutes and 11 seconds in a Porsche 956 in the 1983 Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers. The last time that event was run on the Nordschleife. Up towards Schwalbenschwanz, it's named after Swallow's Head, or Swallow's Neck if you prefer, also known as the mini carousel. There it is. Really tricky corner this as well, because you can pop out the side of that one as well as Tim Claessens shows us how to do it. And then towards Galgenkopf now, another critical corner, because a good exit out of Galgenkopf, you will be given the reward all the way down the Dottinger Hoe. 3 kilometers of absolutely arrow straight road here, all the way up to Antoniusbuche underneath the Bilstein Bridge, named after St. Anthony, where there's actually a birch tree there in his honour. Once we go underneath the Antoniusbuche, underneath the Bilstein Bridge, we'll be heading towards Tiergarten, which is a big dip in compression. So you can see Riley Thompson getting the draft here from Tim Claessens. He's absolutely been able to hang on to the back of his rival. Can he get a run into Tiergarten? He's got lots of momentum. This is going to be very close here as well, but backs out of it, and through we go, through Tiergarten and up towards the final chicane. And what a lap there from Tim Claessens. There you go, a tour around the Nurburgring Nordschleife.
Wow. Very impressive, to say the very least. And what a description around this racetrack, and what a fight that's broken out here. This is currently for second, keep in mind, as Kirk Crum is still up in front, Christian, surprisingly here, by a significant margin. 8 seconds is the gap from first to second in the class.
Yeah, so Kurt Crum with actually kind of a similar strategy to what Riley Thompson has done. His time in the pit lane was about 1 minute and 3 seconds, so about just 2 seconds faster than Riley Thompson. So that's why he's out front, even though he was kind of paired up with Tim Claessens before all the pit stop cycle and whatnot. But the driver that's really the question mark in this group is definitely Tim Claessens, because I am sure he is at a disadvantage now. I've been trying to figure out what he's going to do, and unless he doesn't take tires, I don't see how he's going to come out of this with a net gain, or even kind of at least claw back the time that he lost, because the other two are going to be able to take a set of tires and a similar amount of fuel as to what they already have done, and they're not really going to lose out anything from that, just because of the time it takes to change the tires, and kind of matching up quite nicely with how much fuel they need. Whereas he will have basically 12 seconds less of fueling time, but if he's going to take tires, he's going to negate that advantage.
As we said before, it's going to be very interesting in the next hour or so. We are approaching 1 hour to go on the clock, just about even. There's also one thing to note as well when it comes to the strategy for the Audis. They made it to a 9th lap, much of these competitors now for that class. They're currently making their way towards the Dottinger Hoe right now. And Hansen Pete, along with Sakowicz, along with Sam Harper, Neil Middleton, have also stretched it that additional lap. So how does that now factor into the strategy, you think, Christian, knowing that Mickey elected to take a 7-lap run to start off in the Audis, and now that's factored into where the Team Mad cars are going long, where it's potentially now a 9-lap run with a 7-lap at the end for those drivers, compared to a 9-lap run to end it for Mickey.
Well, I'm very surprised actually that these guys have been able to get out to 9 laps. I really thought that they would pit at the end of 8. This might just kind of be them covering off the expectation that they might have to run 17 laps, though I'm quite sure that their race is going to be a 16-lap race. When it comes to Eric Mickey, obviously this is proof that you can kind of still recover from his strategy if he's able to do a 9-lap run. It's just a question of if he's actually able to do that. And if he can't, as you see the Team Mad cars come in, that's totally expected at this point. But if he can't make a 9-lap run, he has to stop at least one more time.
This is going to be very interesting, absolutely. Keep in mind, absolutely, that Mickey has had to run on his own for the past few laps or so. Mickey, in fact, is all the way down to Dottinger Hoe this time at the moment, with nobody around. Currently, the speed's capping out at 145 miles an hour, in fact, down the straightaway here. We'll see where he cycles out. Keep in mind, it was a 36.9 second pit stop for Mickey when he came down the lane. On Erlich, when he came down about a lap ago, it's about 37 seconds in the stall. And the cycle is actually going to be of a later time. How about 35 second pit stops for the Team Mad cars? They take a little bit less time in the pit box.
Yeah, and that's expected, obviously, with them able to make it out to 9 laps. They know that they're pretty much certainly good on fuel, so I imagine they've cut it right to the wire. It does look like Mickey's going to be able to join back in with them as a draft pack. He's a little bit behind, but I think he can close that gap up and get with them.
Let's take a look on board, and you can see as they make their way through turns 1 and 2 and skip the arena section, they now make their way to the Grand Prix section. So now the advantage for these two has jumped up by a significant margin, by at least a few seconds.
This is all going to plan for Team Mad, isn't it? This is a really professionally executed job so far, guys.
And this is definitely where the preparation comes in, Christian, where you need to be able to properly plan things out for a race like this.
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly where this race is basically going to be won or lost, and I think that's true for actually both the GT4 and the TCR class, and it is entirely kind of a teamwork deal in terms of preparation and whatnot, and obviously it's something which for a race like this you absolutely have to look at, as the 11 car, Eito Santos Galindo, has had a big off.
Yep, you can see the 11 has spun around. You can see that was Putekos who was right around him. They were shuffling a little bit right before this, I believe.
Ooh, this is of course, remember these guys were driving so hard back and forth with one another. I'm trying to pick where that is on the circuit. Oh, it's coming up to Adner Force at the Foxhole. That's basically top of top gear there. Yeah, there we go. Coming through the Foxhole here, and there's such a big compression. And did he take a bit too much of the car? No, the car actually got completely, almost took off there, and bang. Oh dear, that will surely be a tow back to pit lane for Santos Galindo. Oh god, yeah, look at the state of that.
Absolutely demolished in that sequence, as Banfield and Wolf, by the way, have stayed connected together throughout this stint so far. They're now approaching the end of their third lap, behind by 42 seconds. And at this point, who do you think is going to have the upper hand in this battle, Christian? Do you think Banfield can hold on for the span of an hour here, or how do you think this could fare out here before these drivers have their second scheduled stop?
Well, I think that they're tied together for the rest of the race, and obviously Isaac Snyder was in amongst this group before he had his really miserable lap and then retired from the race. As actually Eito Santos Galindo has also retired from the race after that big wreck that he just had. So it's really probably going to come down to who doesn't make a mistake out of this pair, I think, because they are almost identical in terms of pace. And I don't see any way that's going to really change. They're doing the same strategy. They're pitting on the same laps. I don't think pace will determine the running order. I think it'll probably come down to who comes out ahead on the pit stop, and then if either of them make a mistake. And it really comes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, which is that you're racing the track here rather than each other. And I imagine that, for example, our leader in the class, Dallas Pataska, who's currently 43 seconds ahead, he's probably not running at full pace now, because there's just no need to do so. He's not going to gain anything. He just needs to run around and essentially complete the race.
I tell you what, he's obviously got a very fine band, because he is only 0.4 of a second off his outright fastest lap of the race so far. You talk about that groove, Christian. He's in that groove right now, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, and really from lap 1 we saw him just pull out a significant advantage, got himself out of that draft range, was never under threat, and it's really just driven around and had a really good afternoon by himself at this point.
It'd be one of his best runs so far this season for Dallas Pataska, and when it comes to Pataska, he's shown great speed throughout the campaign. There's a reason he's had 2 top 5s in a victory so far in the 4 major series rounds in the European Pro Splits. But keep in mind, in some of the races in the past where he's had dominating speed like this, Christian, he's made mistakes. He hasn't really had that major pressure, though, for this race today. He just needs to get around the traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, say with the modifieds at New Hampshire, we saw he was very, very strong there as well. And it just didn't come off and got involved in some incidents and really lost a lot of points and some strategy decisions that were a little bit questionable as well. But driver who's very, very fast, and one of those drivers on the service who is probably kind of not had a fair shake of it when it comes to qualifying for, say, the pro level series and whatnot, is just kind of never really had the luck on his side. And some of it, I think he would have to be honest and say was self-inflicted, but a lot of things that have happened in terms of his Pro Series qualifying campaigns has really been out of his control, you know. So a driver who's very, very fast and just has unfortunately not ever had the opportunity to kind of be in any of the pro level series to show that.
Let's take a look, meanwhile, at Sam Harper, because we mentioned the surprise of drivers making it 9 laps. How about 10 laps? Because Harper and Neil Middleton are in range to do that right now.
Pete Harrod with a big moment, actually. The TCR leader is just giving it back to Sakovic right there.
Yep, it's the net race lead for these drivers projected at the moment, as Handsome Pete having to make a nice handsome save.
Deary me, that's it's almost as if he actually had to yank the handbrake there to try and stay on. I'm sure he didn't, but wow, what great save there from Pete Harrod. And actually, he'll be able to recover the time by being in behind his teammate Maciek Sakovic there. So no harm done. Although maybe a new pair of underpants possibly.
Borowski has come in and he had, I believe it, one of the drivers to have an incident this lap, so he has taken a quick stop of 24 seconds here. He had a moment where he did spin around this past lap, so he's elected to take an extra stop here, or at least the extra stop here. He would need to make it 7 laps to the end, Christian. Can he do that, is the big question.
Yeah, he can definitely make 7 laps from here to the end. Obviously just not ideal and really kind of screws up any strategy that he had, so it's obviously put him back a little bit, but yeah, can totally make it to the end from here. You can stretch out a GT4 to 8 laps if you're very, very conservative. So if there ever is a time to crash, it's when you can make it to the end.
See how things cycle forward for him at the moment. Brodsky has been running top 5 in his class all day today. Meanwhile, let's check back in with Banfield and Wolf. And for Banfield, I believe that's a fuzzy llama. I believe that's the mascot. It was talked about early on at the start of the season, going with a bit of a different motif for their logo design for this year, involving a llama as their mascot.
I remember in my days as a travelling sales rep around the United Kingdom, there was a cafe on the A66, not far over the Scottish border into England, and it was called the Jamalama Karma Cafe, and they had I don't know what you would call them, a herd, a group of llamas that you sit having your lunch, and the llamas just sort of roam around the place. It was very cool. Better than your normal motorway services.
What is it like to meet a llama in person? I don't think I've honestly ever seen a llama in person, even at a petting zoo.
You can't get close because they look cuddly, but they're vicious and they spit at you apparently. So I made sure to stay away from a distance. Lovely animals, but I don't think you want to get close to them. Maybe that's what Ross Banfield was thinking of by choosing a llama as a mascot. Going, I might look cuddly with my purple wheels, but actually I will put you on the fence if you try and overtake me.
That's the way to put it. Pit stops this lap. Harper and Middleton have come in for their scheduled stops, and now it's going to be really interesting where Harper cycles with all this. How about a very quick stop of 33.8 seconds, but won't be close enough to fight with Handsome Pete, Sakovic, and Eric Mickey, who are fighting down the front stretch.
Yeah, I'm really surprised actually that those guys were able to make 10 laps in the TCR. I was totally not expecting them to be able to go that far, but that probably means that Eric Mickey is actually not in the perilous situation that I believed he was in. I think he can for sure get to the end now without stopping again, so he's absolutely in this fight for the lead.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how the strategy plays out with this now and how these drivers fight at this moment. And by the way, the reminder coming in from one of the representatives when it comes to the Fuzzy Llama mascot, the Fluffy Llama is the best way to put it, is it's a reminder of themselves to have fun and not be so serious this season in regards to the UDOX cars.
I wish there was more of that in sim racing. I think it's always good to enjoy yourself and have a bit of fun, because this is, I mean, racing these cars around the Nordschleife, how can you not have fun? It's absolutely fantastic. Mind you, I have to say, I'm equally surprised that the TCR machines were able to stretch those 10 laps, because I've actually had the pleasure for a year of owning an Audi RS3 road car, and I can tell you that fuel consumption was not its strong point. Straight line speed, fantastic. Fuel consumption, thirsty.
Indeed. By the way, Eric Mickey has broken up the Team Mad cars, and how crucial is that going to be here, especially if you can keep them broken up here, Christian?
No, I think it's mega. I think that's exactly what he needed to do, is to get in between them, and now he definitely has a shot at this. Obviously, when they get to the Dodinga-Ho, these two can link up and really reorder that grouping, which I'm sure is what they're probably going to do. But it's not quite worked out for them here, because when Mickey was able to get past Sakovic, it could have opened up a gap big enough for Pete Herod to get away, but it hasn't done that. And Herod's now definitely still within the draft range. So I think this is definitely a fight between the three of them. I think Pete Herod's a little bit stronger than Masic Sakovic, but definitely any of these three can win it as long as they stay together. And it'll come down to a pretty intense drafting battle, I think, on the last lap.
This is going to be really intriguing, absolutely, around this racetrack to see how things fare out for them. Again, to reset, under 50 minutes to go on the clock. Dallas Pataska, your overall race leader in the Porsches, leads by 47 seconds. Your class leader currently for the GT4s is Kurt Crum at the moment by 7 seconds over Tim Claessens. Sam Harper was the pass leader for the Audis. It's now Handsome Pete in this grouping of cars, followed by Mickey and Sakovic.
I tell you what, guys, Dallas Pataska is just in imperious form today. Only half it. He was at 8:27.420 last time by. That's only half a second off his outright best lap. He was 4 seconds quicker than Ross Banfield in second place last time by. He's on another level entirely. He is definitely the king of the ring today.
Absolutely. These two have stayed tight together, as we've talked about several times throughout the day as well, and gotta love the effort that Grizzly TFR has had for the past few seasons. The two organizations, for those who don't know, grouped up together in these past couple major series campaigns to work together for this series, and they've put together a ton of great work, Christian. And we've seen that now result, as we talked about, as being the top organization in terms of the team standings this season.
Yeah, and the kind of organizations and teams and almost mega teams have kind of become sort of a thing of the majors in the past couple of years. For the longest time in the Americas, well, back actually, before there was multiple regions of the major series, it was kind of always the Alliance team was the guys to beat. And then obviously the Kinetic Racing group arrived and kind of showed the way a little bit for maybe a season or two, I would like to say. And now kind of we've had a bunch of different organizations kind of group up or really form up. Obviously we've got Forge in the Americas side of things, UDOX in both, well, definitely both European and Americas. Not sure if they've actually got anybody in international, but then the Grizzly and TFR guys have really kind of made European region their home. As has the Bombshell Motorsports group. So there's a lot of really cool kind of organizations and teams that have sprung up around the series, and I think that's a really good thing to see, because those groups then kind of go and race other things together. You know, they form up cars for the special events and whatnot. So it's good to see that the series kind of promotes that, and obviously guys are able to kind of reap the rewards as we see Sakovic is going to look for this pass on Eric Mickey. This is a super dangerous place to try and attempt this, and he gets it done. A little bit of a scruffy recovery right there, but does actually manage to pull the pass off.
You got to give Eric Mickey quite a bit of credit there, because I think he had to be a willing party there. Yeah, you can see a little bit of a acknowledgement there from Sakovic actually, because I think if Mickey had been stubborn there, they both were in the wall. I think that was really quite polite there from Eric Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey actually, I was about to say, did let off there in that sequence when he's seen that opportunity arise. So the Team Mad Cars are back 1-2 once more in this grouping. For now, is how long is going to be the big question. Coming up to 5 estimated laps to go for this class this time by. That has allowed Hanson Pete to build up a bit of a buffer for the time being. Keep in mind that Dallas Pataska is within range the next couple laps to lap these cars, and that's that one less lap factor we're expecting for these cars.
Yeah, that's why they're going to probably run 16 laps instead of 17, which is what I got predicted for the 911 Cups and the GT4s. And it's interesting that traffic is really not going to play a major part in this race because of that. Obviously, not that many 911 Cups and GT4s won't get around and start lapping TCRs, at least not the front runners of the TCRs or whatnot. So quite a nice race, I would say. There's not a huge amount of traffic management for anybody except really the 911 Cups, and there's not many of those still running.
Absolutely. Now, the interesting thing still is how things could work out with Kurt Krum, still, with the GT4s, because he's matching lap times with Tim Klassen's right now. Let's take a look at how these laps have been faring in particular. The interval has been shuffling 7 to 8 seconds for the past few laps. You can see as well just the pluses and the minus. That major plus is where the pit stop came in for Klassen's, by the way. So you can see Crum's putting in some great lap times right now that is helping with this buffer to the 451 from that earlier pit stop.
Yeah, and I think Crum's going to be coming in at the end of this lap. I'm showing that he's completed 7 laps of his stint. I believe there's just been an incident in TCR. Yeah, Eric Mickey has had a big moment and has now lost that lead pairing.
Oh, and this is going to be not because of damage, but because he had to make a massive save and use the Armco as a crutch just about.
So this is coming up to Galgenkopt. It looks like it's happened here. And we said how important this corner is. Coming on to, that's agony. Just trying to push that little bit too hard to keep up with the Team Mad Cars there. Did Eric Mickey? Galgenkopt, the drivers know how important it is to get a good exit out of here. And just the tiniest touch onto the grass, and keeps the impact to a minimum. But I tell you what, Christian, if that wheel is hit the barrier at the wrong angle, that could cause damage to the suspension or the steering possibly.
Yeah, I mean, he flat-sided the wall pretty good right there, so I have to keep an eye on, see if kind of his steering wheel is offset. But actually, it looks like he's really gotten away with that, surprisingly. Obviously, lost time and not an insignificant amount of it. It's going to make it difficult for him to keep up with this lead pair now, or should I say, at least get back to this lead pair, because now he's got a challenge on his hands. Obviously, he was able to run with them, but can he run them down? I'm not so sure.
Now we've seen how important the draft can be in some of these sections of the racetrack. He's already in range to be lapped by Dallas Pataska, in fact, now as a result of that too. Pataska's already passed by Sam Harper on the racetrack the past couple laps or so. So we'll see how things play out with how Pataska runs this. A massive bit of difference in straight line speed. Might be able to lap them before they reach the Nordschleifer.
A couple of weeks ago, I was watching an onboard lap with Hans Stuck, of course, one of the legends of the Nurburgring, in an M3 GTR. And when he went and did the did the GP section, and as he was coming onto the Nordschleife, it goes, right, now time to tighten up the belts. It just shows you there's two different approaches to the GP part and to the Nordschleife part.
Absolutely. Makes things very intriguing, absolutely, around this racetrack in general, in terms of how you would ride this circuit. And this GP section, keep in mind, also puts on some great racing, Peter, in terms of some of the F1 Grand Prix it's hosted over the years.
Indeed, yeah. Of course, the GP section came here in the early 1980s. In fact, the first race they had in the GP circuit was a race with Mercedes AMG saloon cars, which was won by none other than Ayrton Senna. But as we mentioned, the last time the Nurburgring 1,000 kilometer sports car race was held on the Nordschleife was 1983. And can you imagine 1983 Stefan Beloff doing the Nordschleife in 6 minutes and 11 seconds? Absolutely mind-blowing. It shows you, first and foremost, Stefan's incredible knowledge of the circuit and his bravery, but also, I mean, how good the 956 was for that period of time. I mean, it's nearly 40 years ago now. It's mind-boggling.
Well, you say how good the 956 was, but can you imagine driving the 956 around a track like this? Can you imagine driving the 956 around this track now and knowing what you know about safety, being okay with doing that?
Well, also the tires. I mean, you think about what a Michelin tire is, or whatever tire brand you're using, whatever a slick tire is now compared to 40 years ago, a Group C sports car tire, it's mind-boggling. It is just incredible. Stefan Beloff, one of the bravest men to ever walk the planet.
You've seen as well, by the way, Dallas Patas controlled by the Audis. Lap them down. So all the drivers in that class will indeed have an estimated 4 to go this time by. But it definitely does take a lot of bravery to race here, because the nerves, even on the sim, can pick up a lot here as we follow along and pick up Tim Claessens and Riley Thompson now scrapping for position still.
I'm keeping an eye on just up ahead to see if Kurt Crum is actually going to come down pit road.
And yes, indeed, Kurt Crum has come down.
And Thompson comes down as well. So these drivers are kind of taking that 5-lap run now to the end of the race. And we'll see. We'll have to see how long Tim Claessens runs for, and also how long the pit stop time is for these guys.
And interesting differences on how these drivers are taking the pit lane as well. Riley Thompson not using the limiter. Kurt Crum, believe, did down the lane. So we'll see as they are now up on the jacks how long they take overall here, Christian.
Yeah, so what we're looking for here is to see if as soon as the car drops off the jack, does it pull away? It sounds obvious, but the reason for that is if it doesn't pull away immediately, they're having to take more fuel than they are in terms of tires. But see, both cars taking tires, I think that's the smart decision for this strategy that they're running with. It's just a question as to how much fuel do they have to take. See there, Kurt Crum immediately pulls away out of the box, so he's going to be quite close on fuel. But I think that's the optimum way to run this race. You see Riley Thompson a little bit further behind, but he was a little bit further behind on track as well.
He also took about an extra second or so of fuel into the car, so off and away they go. And now it becomes the question, how does Tim Claessens now handle this? We'll have to see as he's now approaching what would be his 6th lap at the completion of this circuit in about 8 minutes or so.
Yeah, and the pit stop times for those guys, Kurt Crum 1 minute and 3 seconds about, and 1 minute and 5 seconds for Riley Thompson, so about the same as their last pit stops. That makes sense for both of those drivers.
We have a question for you guys. Who do you think is going to win between these two Team Mad cars? When does the camaraderie in the Team Mad garage disappear all of a sudden?
I'd say final lap when it comes down to potentially the final straightaway, you'd have to think, Christian?
Yeah, I have to agree, because despite that incident, Eric Mickey is not out of the picture. He's still lurking in the background. You see there, he's about the carousel distance behind, so they can't afford to fight too hard because then they'll lose a 1-2 as a team, perhaps. It makes sense to just follow each other around, I think, until the last lap, and then I think it is everybody for themselves. I think Pete Harrod has the pace advantage, though.
Yeah, Handsome Pete has been so dominant today. Ryan Mayer and Richie Hearn, by the way, in and out of their pit stops this time. Richie Hearn going with a bit of a longer stop in his McLaren compared to Mayer, who's off and away in the Bombshell Racing Team machine. So the 70 machine taking what appears to be a full tank, possibly. 48.7 seconds in the pit box, by the way, as we go back to the audience.
I suppose with that McLaren, with that beautiful shape, it's such an aerodynamic shape. I wonder, I mean, fuel consumption-wise, do we see much difference between it and the Porsche?
No, they should be, well, they're equal certainly to the laps. There might be a little difference between them, but approximately they're the same. They've got significantly different sized fuel tanks as well, but the fuel fill time is the same across the class. So the McLaren actually has the biggest tank, 110 litres for the McLaren, 104 litres for the M4, and then the Porsche is a very small lightweight car and can only actually fill 87 litres, but its fuel fill time is adjusted accordingly.
I see. Because of course the in the real world with the Porsche Cayman GT4, you can buy the Manti Racing Pack with a 120 litre tank, where you could go on forever with a tank that big.
Yeah, absolutely, and that would be the thing. So the Porsche is restricted down to kind of match up to the IMSA Pilot Challenge specifications.
And can it be changed back for 24-hour races then, Christian?
It cannot, and to be honest, it probably shouldn't be, because then the Caymans would be able to go significantly further than the 570s on fuel.
It's a footballer's car anyway.
Why do I have a feeling you're going to say something like that?
I feel I have to, JP. I've got to keep up appearances.
Team Mad Cars, by the way. Handsome Pete continues to hold on to the race lead for that class. Sakowicz not able to build up enough of a run to be able to pull on by that time. They're coming up to an estimated 4 laps to go. I have to say, I've been very impressed with Handsome Pete throughout this season, because he's putting himself in a great position to get into a great battle for the championship with Tim Claessens at this rate.
Yeah, I would have to agree, and there's actually quite a number of drivers who I think are kind of sort of staking their claim to being a contender for this championship. Obviously, we've seen Tim Claessens is very, very strong as expected. Dallas Pataska is strong, and obviously we've seen here today, and the mods at New Hampshire, he was strong there as well. But then there are actually a number of other drivers who maybe have not been able to get the results that they probably should have done yet. Riley Thompson is definitely one of them. It had a lot of pace, but just hasn't really got the results to show for it. And obviously Sam Harper's been very strong as well. So Europe is really open, I would say, right now.
Could I throw Banfield in there as well? He's been very good across all disciplines.
He entered today a tie for 10th with Travis Henderson, just 22 points back.
Yeah, and I tell you what, when you've got the luck of the fluffy llama with you, you know that's going to bring some good omens, I'm sure.
Is that the secret? You got to carry a fluffy llama in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fluffy llama, and it's you sit the fluffy llama in the passenger seat, and it can spit at your rivals on the way past.
Can I just get like the soft toy version of that rather than the full size animal?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And you just tape a water pistol to its mouth.
Oh my goodness.
It has taken a turn here in the booth.
The llama's name is Loa, by the way.
Loa?
On the car. So Loa. Lola.
Lola? Like Lola, like the race car chassis manufacturer. Do you know actually that their wind tunnel still gets used, even though the company is very bust? The company, in fact, the Mazda DPI car was actually the bodywork's been modelled and developed in Lola's wind tunnel.
I love the definition of very bust as opposed to being slightly bankrupt.
Well, there is a much more rude
bankrupt.
way, which is not fit for broadcast slightly. That was the most polite version.
Approaching 30 minutes to go on the clock, and what's turned into an interesting sequence as traffic ahead. It's Sam Harper in between the battle for second for the Porsches.
And it has opened up a little bit. Joshua Wolf has fallen back off of Ross Banfield. And Banfield might now have the opportunity to break away.
Yeah, Banfield's been doing the solid job the past lap or so. 1.3 seconds pick up the last time by Peter compared to Wolf's time.
Yeah, looks like Banfield really starting to drop the hammer here, isn't he? In the 777 machine, harnessing the whoa. That's very easy to do there. That's an Arenberg curve. When you're coming out of Schweidenkers, you're going really absolutely flat out in top gear, and then you're asking the car to slow down in a hurry. Very, very easy to pinch the wheel in this 911 GT3 Cup car. No anti-lock braking system, of course. I do believe the new version has the option of it. So whether running in North America, the new 992 Cup car with ABS, but I don't know if they are in the Super Cup and other series in Europe. I'm not sure. I think it can be spec'd one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one either, but the 992 obviously a very, very impressive car, especially for what is essentially a driver development series.
Meanwhile, the 451 is into the pit lane. And you can see, just taking its time right now, trying to fill up on the gas. Already 16 seconds in the stall so far. See where Kirk Crum cycles in all this. It's going to be very critical here for who can win this class. As Klassen's off and away. And this is going to jump Kirk Crum.
And he did not take tires. But he does come out in the lead of the race. So this will be interesting now to the end. Obviously 30-minute run, well, a little bit under, 28 minutes and 30 seconds, but he's got this run to the end of the race now where he is at a tire disadvantage, but he has track position advantage.
Taking a look at the times, the fall off wasn't that bad actually, though that's the main thing, Christian, too, because he only had maybe, compared to his top time in the lap stint, about a second or so of fall off.
Yeah, the tires don't fall off too aggressively, but there definitely is fall off, especially beyond, say, an hour of running. So I do think that he is going to be at a pace disadvantage. It just depends on if he can pull out, obviously, either equivalent pace or a little bit better pace on those worn tires relative to Kurt Crum on his essentially new tires.
Gap going to be least. Significant margin as Wolf, by the way, has closed up with the help of the traffic. And the battle going on as that is really realistic. Masiek. I should rather say, and Handsome Pete. Both trying to let him by. Yes, that is the nickname coming in from Team Mad for the number 8 machine. Really realistic is the number 8.
Realistic as in he's got a really fancy sim setup, or realistic in terms of his chances?
It's the nickname.
That's what I mean, but does it mean that he's got really realistic as in he's got a really, really high spec computer, so he's got really realistic graphics, or is it that he's really realistic about his chances?
That is a good question.
Yeah. I tell you what, guys, the 911 Cup cars, their lap times are really starting to drop off now. Even Dallas Pataska now is well into the 8:28s. Now this is where we're getting into the really, particularly with Dallas Pataska, his hands are going to be getting sweaty right now, because this is where the cars are really past their best in terms of the tyres. I wouldn't think they would throw new tyres on and if they need to stop again. So I think this is where you're really having to manage it. And it looks like, yeah, we'll be with just about 3 laps to go. It's going to be close, actually, for Pataska. In fact, there'll be 3 to go at the line.
It should be 17 laps. My math says that it's a 17-lap race for GT3 Cup and GT4. Now, the predictive timing suggests it might be 18 laps. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Oh, and that has implications for other cars in the field, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to wait and see. Keep in mind, there is an stop, believe, coming up here. And yes, Dallas Pataska will come in this time by with a more than a minute lead. So the scheduled stops coming in. Ross Banfield, Josh Wolf expected to come in this time by. These are the last pit stops for the Porsches.
Well, I think this does confirm it then as a 17-lap race, I think. I'm so confident that it's 17 laps. We shall see.
It's 17-ish laps. Plus or minus 1.
Yes. See, I like that. I like that vagary.
I mean, Christian, how much preparation have you done so far for this race in particular? Because I believe you're racing later on tonight as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done a decent number of laps around this track. It was actually mainly preparation for the 24-hour race. So I have quite a good handle, I would say, in terms of GT4s. Relative to the other cars, I was sort of predicting that GT3 Cup would follow the rule of GT4s, as we see second and third place, Ross Banfield and Joshua Wolf both come into the pits at the exact same time and pretty much basically a second apart. So this will be interesting to see where these two come out. And I went and looked at the International Series results, and they only did 17 laps with the 911 Cup. And the GTRs were lapped once, so they ran 16 laps, and GT4s at the front of the field ran 17. So it's kind of basing a lot of things off of that, plus kind of my own predictions in terms of what the average lap time would be. And yeah, it's the pit stops that make the difference, you know, in terms of whether it goes the extra lap or not.
Interesting stuff. As interesting sequence. How about 1 second quicker for Joshua Wolf once more in the pit lane, and that jumps Ross Banfield for the time being.
Oh, that is frustrating. If you're Ross Banfield, you've been doing the most of the heavy lifting, you've been leading, and then you come out the pit lane and you see in your mirror your rival hopping past you. That must be infuriating.
Yeah, that's why it's always important to try and break away from the draft, just so that you're not kind of pulling a driver along with you who's then saving fuel, who then jumps you towards the end of the race. It's never fun when that happens, but you're kind of always conscious of it being a thing.
They'll have about 2.5 laps or so to be able to sort themselves out and figure out who's going to finish second in the class overall. Again, your interval is cycled out to between Tim Klatsons and Kurt Crum, approximately about 5+ seconds or so. Rather, 6 seconds between those drivers. Team Mad drivers within 0.6 of 1 error for that class lead. In our words, it's going to be very busy, to say the very least, for a couple of these positions. Ryan Walker, by the way, has also cycled to a battle with Trevor Burke. That's for 10th position overall in the race. This is 6th in the class. It is on different strategies, keep in mind for now. Walker coming up to his 7th lap this time. Bobrovsky coming up to his 4th.
We'll see how that shakes out. Who's got the better strategy? But as usual, Ryan Walker running a completely flawless race up to now. He can just clock out those fast lap times over and over again. It's such an important skill for endurance racing.
And Christian, Not sure if you've had the opportunity to work with Ryan. What's your thoughts on Ryan as a driver on the sim?
Well, I think Ryan's always pretty realistic about what he's going to be able to do in the race and whatnot, and he's kind of always got good objectives. Obviously, back for the Daytona 2.4, his goal was realistic, just to make it to the end without making any mistakes, and he did very well because of it. And I think that's probably the exact same goal that he's gone in with here today. Tried to convince him a little bit into trying the M4, but he wasn't for it and decided to go with the Cayman instead. So a little bit disappointed in that one. I think I'm probably one of the few who's kind of a big fan of the M4 GT4 around this track, and that's what I'm going to run later, but just have to see what I go up against. But in terms of Ryan, I think he's running a solid race, and obviously where other drivers in the class have kind of faltered and made mistakes, the two drivers he was racing with earlier, Aldous Teclis and Eito Santos Galindo, have both gone off, and he hasn't. So it's kind of just not an easy two positions, but it's a methodical way of, hey, I maybe not got the pace to win the race, but I can get a good finish just by getting to the end cleanly and executing a good strategy. Yes, the BMW. He's running in 10th place in class, but I am glad to see a BMW out there.
There's the impartial voice there of Christian Challoner here on GSRC.
That's Colin Martzoff, by the way, who's worked his way up a couple positions. It's been a very quiet day for Martzoff, in fact. He is running, again, top 10 in class. Ray Partridge is behind him in 10th position for reference. And what are some of the major... How do I phrase this right? Some of the slight differences, I should say, Christian, that you may notice from running a Porsche in this class compared to, say, the BMW.
So there's a lot of differences between those two cars in particular. When it comes to the difference between, say, the Porsche Cayman and the McLaren 570, the main differences in those cars is particularly in terms of the sizing of them. So obviously the McLaren is a much bigger car, both kind of all around. It's just footprint is larger. It's got more aerodynamic surface, so it has a bit more downforce and whatnot and like that. But it's carrying a lot more weight, so it has more power to compensate for that. The Porsche is kind of the extreme in terms of it's a very lightweight car, but it's very small. So it's not. It's reliant on kind of that kind of flightiness, I'm going to call it, in terms of, well, agility is a better word for it. It's reliant on its agility, especially in slow speed corners, in terms of its low weight and its short kind of wheelbase and everything like that, that allows it to just have really rapid direction changes. But because it's a smaller car, it's less sure-footed in kind of the faster tracks, and it's actually a little bit of a surprise to me as to why I've seen so many of them around this track, because in my opinion, I think the M4 is actually probably the best choice for this track. And the reason for that is it's obviously quite a big car, it's long, it's very good in high-speed corners, and here it's really all about that. It's a lot of connected high-speed flowing corners. Now the difficulty is, I think as a newcomer, the Cayman is more approachable. The BMW in particular requires quite a lot of time in it to really get the best from it. And I can understand that that's potentially a little bit off-putting, especially in a series such as this, where everybody's always jumping around different cars, different track series and whatnot, kind of every race, So I can understand that might be an appealing point to pick a Cayman, but for me, I definitely think the BMW is very, very competitive around the Nurburgring, and I'm hopefully going to prove that later on.
We'll have to see if he can improve that, I should rather say, as that BMW running down Donninger Hill. The teammates are separating in the Audis, as now it is the other way around. It's Sakowicz in front, it's Handsome Pete behind. Keep in mind that Pete did let by the number 8 machine. And by the way, in regards to the nickname discussion, Dave Crozier from Team Mad, in response, I shall allow the speculation on the reasoning for the realistic magic for the nickname. Still though, they're both thinking big picture here to make sure they can get to the end here comfortably here, coming up to 2 estimated laps to go for the class.
have to say, I nearly fell asleep in that half a lap of the Nurburgring Nordschleife BMW sales pitch.
Hey, I'm telling you,
I'm only kidding.
I'm gonna prove that it's a competitive car.
I think that's more your ability, Christian, than anything else. I mean, I'll be honest, if there was a Corvette in this race, that would all be I would be talking about, so I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our own favorites, you know. I just think that the BMW is perhaps maybe a little bit misunderstood. I think it just requires time in it, and you got to get really comfortable with sliding it around, because if you're not comfortable with sliding it around, it's very difficult to get the pace out of it.
Look at the bright side. At least there's not a Ford.
Oh, we would never hear the end of how the Ford was obviously the best car, right? With the best
Meanwhile,
engine and all that.
Meanwhile, battle for position. Joshua Wolf not able to make the pass, electing to actually save behind Banfield here.
I tell you what, you're coming through Tiergarten, being able to just place the car perfectly, and then particularly with the 911 Cup Porsche, trying to get it slowed down with no ABS, very, very easy to lock up there.
It's actually the part of the circuit which I find the most kind of actually frightening, is he's looking for a move now into turn 1. No, he lifts off and elects to sit in behind. Wonder if he's trying to just save a little bit of fuel at this point. Obviously, he's now got the opportunity to save some, whereas before he was kind of dragging the pair of them along. But yeah, that last section of the racetrack is just so difficult, and it can really catch you out, and it's just nothing feels comfortable driving through there. Everything feels out of control. It's very bumpy, and you know it's just difficult to get what you can out of it, but not get too much because it's just so high risk.
Yeah, you can. By the way, keep in mind, Wolf has that 1 second less on fuel, so that's definitely a major factor on why that saving may come into play for these respective competitors. True test will be when he gets another opportunity in a passing zone, possibly for Wolf to try and jump by Ross Banfield again. It's similar to what happened before, where he elected to save much of the run in the last stint. Under 14 minutes to go, by the way, on the clock. They're expecting to take the white flag this upcoming time by. Possibly is the key word. Meanwhile, the Team Mad Cars, as they continue to sort themselves out, Eric Mickey is slowly but surely reeling in these cars. With the swap they did, he picked up a couple seconds, Peter.
Yep, Eric Mickey not out of this. He's battling like a lion here in that 86 car, and you wonder, maybe there's the possibility these two Team Mad cars could potentially trip up over one another as we get towards the business end of this race. So we shall see where they end up. I don't think Mickey's out of this for sure.
Yeah, I don't think so either. As long as he gets a bit of help, possibly, this is going to be where he can close in one more swap and he gets within range of the draft. Christian.
Yeah, exactly. And he was about a second fast the last time by compared with Sakovic, so he is closing the gap down. It's just a second faster isn't enough, you know, with such few number of laps to go. Obviously, on a normal track, you're saying he's a second lap faster, you'd think he'd be there in like 3 minutes time, but no. Obviously at the Nurburgring, a second a lap is significant, but it's not necessarily enough.
Trouble for Ray Partridge, just let by the second and third overall cars by going off into the sand trap.
Yeah, a little bit of an unorthodox method of letting lead lap cars by, but he's having his own kind of race with no competition around him, so definitely not the worst thing that could have happened, though. I don't think it was intentional. You see him here slowing down for the corner and just not quite getting it wound up in time, just dip the left sides into the gravel and then kind of rather conveniently moved fully off the circuit, let the two 911 Cups by, and then got back on the road.
Very good manners there from Ray Park.
Corey Ray Partridge scored inside the top 11 for the class. 15th overall, last time by at the stripe. Speaking of that scrap, you have to think Wolf, next time they get back to the Dodger Hole, might take a peek here, Christian. Or do you think he waits for the last lap to make sure for sure that he holds on to the spot, since they keep on fighting pretty well and they keep on trading some blows in the midst of the Grand Prix section of the racetrack?
I think unless an opportunity with a lap car presents itself that allows them to kind of get some separation, I think it just makes sense to wait until the last lap and just try and see if you can pull the pass off, just so that there's no opportunities of being repassed, so to speak. You don't want to show your hand and show the kind of run that you can get, and then the next time by have the exact same tactic put on you. So it probably makes sense to wait until the last lap.
So in our words, patience is going to be very vital.
Absolutely, and I think it's the same thing in the TCR class. And actually, just taking a look at GT4, so Tim did get that 12 seconds back, so it did kind of work out as a wash, but it's a wash in terms of that he's on more worn tires now, so it doesn't seem to have been affecting him too much. Kurt Crum and Tim basically ran the exact same time last time. By a 10th at the Nurburgring is just nothing, so the gap there is around about 6 seconds, and looks like it's pretty stable.
They were running very stable lap times and even lap times before, even with the split on the strategy. Keep in mind that the track temperature is always very vital with the opportunity for a double stint, regardless of the class, too, Christian. And the track temperature has not reached anywhere above 70. So it stayed ice cold for this part of the race.
Yeah, so that does obviously favor kind of keeping the tires cool and in a good range, so to speak. There's really sort of two ways in which the tires kind of degrade. Obviously, one is wear, and that's kind of your hard limit that you're up against. If there's no tread left, then it doesn't matter that the tread was running cool because there's literally no tire remaining. That shouldn't be a problem for these guys. The other main one is kind of temperature effects and sort of drop off in that sense of things, and that's the one that tends to get you in terms of if you run the tires at a significantly high temperature, higher than kind of is at their best for a long time, then that's what creates the drop off, so to speak, and that's why getting a new set is obviously preferable.
Absolutely. Needs to hold on for basically another lap or so. Dallas Pataska is making his way around to the final sector of the racetrack. And with under 8 minutes to go, expecting the white flag potentially this time by with the amount of time on the clock.
So this will be the end of lap. This will be the end of lap 15.
16.
16. My apologies. Knew I'd get that wrong. So 17 laps is going to be our race distance.
And what a dominating run it's been for Dallas Pataska. Again today, to emphasize. Was a couple seconds quicker than anybody else in qualifying. Pulled off and away early in this race and has not looked back. How about a minute and 12 seconds last time by at the stripe? And it's going upwards and onwards. With under 7 minutes and 30 seconds to go. Expecting the white this time.
And obviously unassailable lead, providing no mistakes now as he starts his last lap. Is about a minute short of getting an 18-lap race right there.
Pataska has confirmed to his competitors that he is taking the white this time.
This is fascinating. But if Wolf will take the move, it doesn't look like it. Looks like he's going to hold it to the last moment. Banfield just that actually quite comfortably holding it right now as they come up around the Antonius book and underneath the Bilstein Bridge.
Even then, Josh Wolf needs to be a little bit closer, possibly, to take the lunge, Christian, for the final lap.
Yeah, that's not going to work as a passing attempt if he only gets to the back of Ross at that point. It's just too late on, you know. There's no way of making a claim to any side of the racetrack right there. So he needs to exit the last corner. Well, I say the last corner. By that I mean the corner onto the Dodingaho. A lot closer so that he can be fully alongside into that final braking zone. And no matter what, it's going to be a risky move. But it's totally worth trying. Got to give it a go.
Have to give it a chance if you want to have what would be a great run, as the Team Mad Cars have swapped positions again down the Dodger Ho, and now they're starting to scrap a little bit with under 6 minutes on the clock. Is this going to be enough for Eric Mickey to get there? Not quite. He is still seconds behind from these competitors. It looks like it may come down to these two for the class win today.
Eric currently 4.3 seconds behind, so just too far back. You can see him lurking in the background. If these two get together, which I think is highly unlikely, then he will have an opportunity, but realistically he's not going to be able to close down a 4-second gap with just 1 lap remaining.
Yeah, he's lost a second this lap. For reference, remember we were talking about the gap was under 3 seconds or so before the last time by in this section.
Still, I think he's done a great job to challenge these guys. Obviously, running up against a pair of teammates is difficult, and aside from that slight mistake that he made, has really taken the fight to them.
Still going to be a very solid day, and keep in mind, want to give a shout out to Sam Harper, who's had a very solid day overall as well. Quietly has been running 4th in the class as well in the 52 machine. He's been able to break away from the draft from the rest of the competitors, had to fight hard to break that draft, and while he's been on his own for much of this race since then, has kept his car clean and kept it to where he's going to also have a very solid points day. He's been very consistent all campaign with a victory in 3 top 5 so far.
Yeah, it's been super steady for Sam Harper. Had a really good run at the Daytona 2.4 in the GT3 class with the BMW there as well, but strong run in the TCR today too, which is not an easy car to actually get to grips with. It's got quite a unique handling characteristic, shall we say, being front wheel drive with quite a lot of power. So yeah, really, Sam Harper really got to grips with this Audi very well.
Monerlich has also been running inside the top 5 this entire race today. 69, he's made a couple mistakes here and there, had some massive saves, but for him, it'd also be a solid run for him. Would be his 2nd top 5 of the season.
He's got a bit of a hand shifter there, no, but he looks like he's using the paddles behind the steering wheel rather than the hand shifter. For the full hand shifter would be the full touring car experience.
How difficult would that be, though, at the same time, Christian, to have to wheel it hard with the wheel while also shifting to the right hand? I know that's the real car experience, but it's also something that can be difficult to do in the sim.
Well, when we say that's the real car experience, that's kind of the mid-2000s real car experience. Pretty much everything is shifted onto paddle shifts now, which, depending on how you feel about it, is either a good or a bad thing. And
British touring cars still have a hand shift.
That's true, but that's also British touring cars. So
V8 supercars still have it.
V8 supercars does, and this is a whole other conversation that we could head into sometime about how do you make the perfect race car. And I think that personally, it has to be made difficult by the rule set itself, so that you actually cannot kind of make the car easy. For example, these cars should be mandated that it's hand operated sequentially, you know, instead of paddles. It would be a lot cooler, I think. And obviously V8 supercars, spool diff, hand operated sequential is just really cool, you know, especially when you see onboards of things like say 996 Porsche 911 Cups and whatnot. It's really cool to see that old school kind of driving experience.
Well, to get back to that,
hand shifters for hashtag return of hand shifters.
I was about to say, if you've seen on the onboard, guess what was on there? Paddles on the steering wheel as well. So, point to Christian. Insert ding sound. As Banfield...
TCRs have their DSG gearbox with the paddles, but the BTCC car is a hand shift.
Yes.
Indeed. Dallas Pataska, by the way, halfway home. Approaching 1 minute to go on the clock. For Pataska, solid race overall, will be his second victory of the season. It's not over behind him, though, as Wolf is now ready to charge for second.
Yeah, he's got to stay close. He's got to be close as they get to the end of the lap. I think he has to realistically be within two to three car lengths coming onto the Dottinger Her to have a really good shot at this.
Still a good couple minutes out. Better run to the carousel that time, it looked like, for Wolf coming out.
And whilst this is going on, we've obviously got our battles, and GT4 is still quite open, I would say. Tim with a 4.5 second lead right now, so he's looking quite safe. Pete Harrod still leads in TCR, but those guys are still tied together by draft, and there could definitely be a switch of position there.
We'll have to see. Handsome Pete has pulled away by a significant margin of 1.3 seconds, though. He's started to really propel himself forward. This is a great section of the racetrack for him. But white flag is now officially out. Final lap coming up towards the checkered is Dallas Pataska. For Dallas Pataska, he has put on a clinic today. Out-qualified his competitors today by more than 3 seconds. Was one of the classes of the field in all of practice in preparation for this one. And has pulled away by more than 1 minute and 10 seconds. For Satellite Racing, Dallas Pataska is ready to celebrate what would be a big victory for him to help propel him back into the main championship conversation after 5 rounds. Final corner, Dallas Pataska for Satellite Racing wins the Nurburgring 2.4.
Absolutely stunning drive there by Dallas Pataska. To run that clean for that long in this type of car is really, really impressive indeed. But the battle over second spot, far from done. And I tell you what, Joshua Wolf is more than close enough to be able to get that draft along the Dottinger Hoe. If he can get a good exit here out of Galgenkopf. Oh, little bit of a slide, another slide, he's fighting it. Oh, those tyres must be really past their best now. And that's real. Look at the amount more speed that Banfield's been able to carry onto the Dottinger Hoe.
Yeah, I think he's too far back now. He's going to get there as they get down into the braking zone, I think, but he's not going to have position. He's not going to be able to get alongside before then and stake his claim to the corner. So it's going to be really difficult. I don't think he's going to get this done.
Decent bit of speed by about 4 miles an hour. Not close enough for the lunge as they make their way towards Tiergarten. Gonna have to be very brave if he wants a shot. Wolf tries to go deeper on the brakes. Can't quite get there. Big slide from Wolf. That loses him the last opportunity he may have. Ross Banfield will hold on for second. Joshua Wolf will hold on for third in the Porsches.
The gap in TCR is looking pretty close as well. If the timing is correct, there's a 2/10 gap between Harrod and Sakovic.
That's going to be the next grouping of drivers expected to cross the stripe. Handsome Pete right now holding on to that class lead. He was 1.3 seconds, remember, ahead this lap. Will Sakovic, though, find him hard. Both these drivers have been very quick all day, Peter.
Yeah, I tell you what, Sakovic really used the most of the draft going up the hill, the steep section up towards Hohe Acht, and really very quick, fast through Wipperman and Esbach and Brunken to get himself into the driving seat to be able to get a draft from Pete Harrod. Now, remember, these guys are teammates as well. Harrod weaving around, trying to break that toe. Sakovic not quite got enough of an overspeed yet. Harrod might just take this as they get into them. Be very close to the rev limiter now as well, so neither car will go a whole lot faster, but wow, this is close.
Plus 3 miles an hour for Sakovic as here we go in towards Tiergarten. Will he try make the daring move? Handsome Pete in the middle of the racetrack, able to defend. Sakowicz backs off. For Handsome Pete, it's been a day of recovery. Remember, he started off this race out at the pole before making a mistake early on in the race. Got shuffled to 6th, found his way to the race lead by pit stops, and he and his teammate haven't looked back. Checker flag waves. Handsome Pete wins it for Team Mad in the Audis. Second goes to Sakowicz. Eric Mickey rounds out the top 3 today. Sam Harper will round out the top 4 for the class. Malnerwich will round into 5th position. A stellar race for this class today, have to say, Peter, especially with some of the intense battling early on.
Oh yeah, it's been really, really fierce in the TCRs, and like I said, you've really got to get that when you try to get the best out of these cars. You've got to be so committed, and as we can see coming into the final part of Tiergarten, this is always a big relief when you get to the checkered flag at any race here at the Nordschleife.
Top 5 run for him today in the class, as he'll take the checker flag while weaving. Checker flag waves for him. The 69 will round out the top 5 in the class. Meanwhile, Tim Claessens, let's take a look at him right now in his class lead. More than 5-second advantage over Kirk Crum. Crum in the background. He's looking to secure the checker flag, just needs to make it through cleanly. He does have a car that just had a bit of an off, and George Gruber up in front of him, as Gruber now moves to the side of the mini carousel.
And Gruber's had a really up and down race. Obviously had that incident on first lap and really set him back, and he's managed to recover to 4th place finish, but that must have been a pretty miserable afternoon for him to have to run around on his own for the vast majority of the race.
Tim Claessens, though, strategy was a big part of this race today, as well as the fact he had the outright pace today. Kurt Crum gets within drafting distance a touch bit of the car behind, but overall, even with the strategy, 451 has prevailed. Just needs to make it through the final set of corners to make sure he secures the checker flag for his class. What's been a dominating performance for the Grizzly TFR Daytona driver today.
Yeah, he'd really been the man to beat in GT4 as Tim Claessens. We saw that in qualifying. That was a big, big statement early on, and the strategies worked out.
Checker flag waves. Tim Claessens will win the GT4 class for the Nurburgring 2.4. Kirk Crum in 2nd position. Riley Thompson rides in 3rd position. In 4th position, Travis Henderson rounding up the top 5. Trevor Verbrotsky. Currently those drivers yet to cross the stripe. Let's follow along with Riley Thompson, as Thompson had a very impressive day. Strategy came into play for him, Christian.
Yeah, and I'm actually not entirely certain what's actually happened with Riley Thompson. Obviously, him, Kurt Crum, and Tim Claessens were quite close together fighting for the lead. Claessens' strategy, I still don't think it was the optimum way to do it, but it did work out for him. He did win the race, so obviously plan worked out in that sense. But Riley Thompson has obviously had something happen that we've missed, because he was in this group, and now he's going to be finishing a minute behind. His last lap was a 9:11. Which is significantly off pace for the class.
Checker flag will wave either way for Thompson. A top 3 and a podium for him in the class, as these drivers now will close things on out. Overall, 24 drivers will take the checker flag here today for the Nurburgring 2.4. Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for the virtual Nurburgring. Welcome back to the Global Sim Racing Channel's coverage of the Nurburgring 2.4. After what was an intense race for some competitors today, here at the virtual Nurburgring here at iRacing. But in the end, it's a dominating performance for Dallas Pataska in the Porsche class today. He wins by 1 minute and 18 seconds for the overall race win as well. Ross Banfield, Joshua Wolf rounded out the top 3 in the class. George Gruber finished 4th in class. 5th went to Isaac Snyder in class. Christian.
And Tim Claessens came away with a win in the GT4 class after that tight battle with Kurt Crum for the entire race. Kurt just within 5 seconds at the flag there. Riley Thompson, another driver who factored into that fight, unfortunately had an issue and comes home in 3rd, unable to factor in that fight for the win. Travis Henderson and Trevor Bobrovsky behind them in 4th and 5th, with Ryan Mayer. Actually, didn't talk too much about him, but he comes home in 6th, with Cordell Colon in 7th. Ryan Walker rounds out the top 8 with his quiet drive. Richie Hearn in the McLaren had a little bit of a more interesting time of it and comes home in 9th, with Colin Martzolf in the BMW back there in 10th, and the first driver officially a lap down in the GT4 class. Ray Partridge, Aldis Paterclis, Eitor Santos Galindo, and Tom Drayling round out the class.
Then in the Audis, it is Handsome Pete who takes home the victory, followed by Sankowicz in 2nd position. Eric Mickey rounds out the top 3. Sam Harper finished in 4th. Monerwich rounded out the top 5 with Baker, Middleton, Belval, Bob Beltrami rounded out the positions there. Darwin Mines had technical issues, finished 15 laps down. That was 29th overall in the race today. That's a look top to bottom at your running order for today. And what was a dominating one for Dallas Pataska. Now he joins us in the broadcast booth. Dallas, first things first, how were you so lightning quick?
Well, pretty straightforward answer there. I sacrificed the majority of my practice time on the Musket 250 and spent that working on my muscle memory and getting a lot of the mental prep out of the way for a race like this. So I pretty much combined practice for two events into one, and yeah, it paid off tremendously.
How was it trying to race around this track today? Because it seemed like with that extra preparation, you were definitely dialed in. How was it trying to make sure you kept on that optimal pace all day as you were running several seconds quicker a lap?
Yeah, after the start, and I realized the pace differential was real. It was really just getting into the rhythm, getting my mindset right, and focusing on what was in front of me, not looking at my relative, not focusing on others, and making sure when I did come up to any slower classes or whatever, I made sure not to make any moves that I didn't need to make. And from then on out, it was just pretty much smooth ride and make sure I got my strategy right, didn't make any dumb mistakes and hurt myself. Like I have a unfortunate history of doing in some races, so that was a big focus coming here, is not only being fast, not only being quick and consistent, but then not making 1 or 2 mistakes that take the win away from me, like what has happened in a few other events in the last couple of years. So really proud to get through this, no mistakes. I had a couple, like a small lock up here or there, but other than that, I'm very proud to get this win. This is the one I had circled on the schedule for this year, so anything after this is an extra bonus.
Well, the next one after this is the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Your thoughts on going into that one, into open wheel racing with the Dallara IR18 for what is a very historic race for both the major series and in general?
I'm not much of an IndyCar guy, but when it comes to the Indy 500, I have a track record of some good success and solid top 5 runs every year. I believe that I've ran it, so we'll see. Fingers crossed that I can keep that momentum going from this race into that one. But either way, that race always turns out to be a blast. Always comes down to the last couple laps. So, we'll start out lap 1 and hopefully still be there at lap 200.
Anyone you want to thank for the run today?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all the guys over at Satellite for all the support. I'd like to shout out Ryan Walker, teammate running, and I think he was in GT4 today. And yeah, all the guys over at Majors for putting on the race, choosing to put this race particularly with these cars on the schedule. Couldn't appreciate it more.
Congratulations on the victory today by more than a minute.
Thank you.
Dallas Pataska takes home the checker flag by 1 minute and 18 seconds. Tim Claessens is now standing by with Christian Challoner.
Tim, just based on the qualifying times after that mega lap, it kind of looked like it was probably going to be an easy race for you, but then definitely turned out that it wasn't. You kind of had that race-long battle with Kurt Crum. Riley Thompson also featured in amongst that as well. It came down to a little bit of strategy, it looked like, and you kind of did something a little bit different from everybody else. You mind kind of talking us through why you went that route, whereas everybody else kind of did the 7 laps, then the change tires twice for 2 5-lap runs?
Hey guys, good evening. Well, it did indeed turn out a little bit closer than I expected it was going to be from after qualifying. Kurt really had some good race pace. Same as Riley when we were sticking together. It was really difficult to get rid of them because they were also going for a different downforce level, it seems. But yeah, during the race, I always, especially here, I know how easy it can kill you, so I always tend to take it a little bit easier. But it wasn't only that. Kurt really had some good race pace on him. Yeah, for the strategy, I really went for the 2 full fill-ups, and then was hoping only it was going to be 2 laps at the end when I calculated before the race. Turned out it was 3, so it was a little bit more difficult to manage it. But I think overall it was the correct way to go about it, so I didn't have to unnecessarily wait for my tires to finish while taking fuel in the first 2 stops. So yeah, that was sort of my thinking behind it.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I mean, we saw you lost the 12 seconds in the first stop, but then you gained it back, and kind of you were sort of artificially close to your rivals kind of for that second run, and then obviously you were kind of sprung back out front after that. You picked the GT4 class around here. We didn't get many people picking the 911 Cup around here. Can you kind of talk us through why you chose this class instead of the 911 Cup?
Oh, well, for me personally, the Cayman, well, GT4, but specifically the Cayman, it's one of my favorite cars on iRacing. Like the past 2 years, I've driven it quite a lot in other 24-hour races. We competed in the Neil Series this season with it as well. And it's just a car that really fits my driving style, which is very smooth, not too aggressive. And the car just works perfectly for that and really responds well to that. So that's why I took this one.
Glad to hear it. It's definitely one of my favorites as well. And congratulations on the win. Is there anybody that you want to give a shout out to before you let you go?
Yeah, of course. Again, TFR Grizzly, they were a great bunch of guys. We did pretty well for this one. And our sponsors, TFR Labs, TeamSpeak, Carrot, and I think that's about it.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming and chatting with us, and good luck for the Indy 500.
Thanks, mate. Have a good night, guys.
Once again, that's Tim Klassen's coming home with the class victory in the GT4. Second place in the Audis went to Sakowicz today, and he joins us in the broadcast booth. First things first, how are you and your teammate feeling? A 1-2 for Team Mad.
Oh, we're definitely really happy about that, and it's not something that we really expected going into this race, because in practice, Pete was definitely standing out as the main driver and the faster driver out of the two of us, and I was kind of struggling. But then after he went off on lap 1, it was kind of like a switch. I knew that if we wanted to get a result out of this, I would have to kind of hold up the leaders and let Pete get back into the fray. So it got really hectic.
An interesting race overall for you, and want to ask a quick question on this front too. We had a discussion about the nickname Dave Crozier has given to you, really realistic magic. Where does the really realistic come from for the nickname for you as a driver?
I really hope you wouldn't ask that, but essentially it comes from another interview I did quite a while back, commenting on a real simulator that was at the university I attended, and I said how good it was, and through the sheer comedic value of that interview and my unpreparedness for it, it kind of stuck around in the team.
Interesting indeed. And now the next race goes to the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Your thoughts on going back to open wheel racing for this series?
It's going to be intense. Every time we go to ovals with majors, the margins are really small and you can't afford to make any mistakes. So we've had some good history with Pete. I've not had much like myself at Indianapolis. So we're going to just have to wait and see. Dig out the old setups, see if they still work for us, or if we need to dig a little bit deeper to counter what the other guys have for this year.
Anyone you want to thank for the run today?
Well, I want to thank both Pete and Eric for some really incredible racing today. Eric was keeping both of us honest, and I don't know how we managed to drop him in the end, but it was 110% for 2 and a bit hours. So big thank you to him for giving us an absolutely awesome race. And also thanks to all our partners like Fanatec and Phoenix Racing. So bring it on. Bring on Indy.
Bring on Indy indeed. Congratulations once again to Sakowicz on the run for him today. Standing by now with Ross Banfield is Christian Challoner.
Ross, congratulations on the P2, but it looked like it was a pretty tight battle between yourself and Joshua Wolf for the entire race, really. Obviously, you had Isaac Snyder in amongst that at the beginning, and he fell away after an incident. But how do you deal with that situation around the Nurburgring where you know that you're kind of tied to somebody else and that there's realistically no opportunities of getting away from them?
Yeah, so I guess the best thing to do is just to know and accept that you're going to be draft locked, and then try and save your tires and conserve your resources for the very last push to try and break it. I kind of gave it my all in the last lap to try and give myself that little bit of cushion so he couldn't make an attempt. But that spin really did hurt me earlier too. That's where I had like a 4-second gap, and then it basically after that spin we were nose to tail the entire way.
Yeah, it definitely looked like it was that tight battle for second spot. Obviously, only 5 cars in the class. Does that kind of affect sort of your mentality for the event, knowing that providing you complete the minimum number of laps and whatnot, you realistically can only finish as low as 5th? Do you kind of push harder, or is it kind of the same deal as you would do for, say, a race with a full field of, say, 25 cars?
Yeah, so I noticed that when I got in, I was a little disappointed because I wanted to race against some more people, but once I found that out, I realized that I kind of needed the points. I've had some kind of lackluster finishes the last couple of races, so I just kind of took it easy. Once I saw Dallas's pace, I kind of just accepted he was going to either, mess up and maybe I'd grab P1, or he was just going to keep the pace and win by a mile, which he did.
That definitely makes sense. I mean, next time out, we're at Indy, so obviously it will be a full field there, and that's quite a bit different to say the least. You kind of got any thoughts on that one?
Just pray. That's all I'm gonna do. It's the Indy 500, anything can go. So I'm just gonna try and focus on a stable set and try to stay out of trouble.
Well, sounds good. Now, before we let you go, anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Just the guys over at UDocs. Great crew. Had some fun. Looking forward to working with them on Indy. It's gonna be a lot of hours going into that set.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you for coming to chatting with us. Congratulations again on the second place finish. Obviously, like you say, good number of points, and good luck for Indianapolis.
Thanks. See you guys.
That's Ross Banfield, second overall and second in the Porsche class today. Joshua Wolf came home in third today. Joshua, talk us through your race today, because you were connected to the hip almost with Banfield, battling back and forth much of this race today.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun racing there. My whole strategy to begin with was just be smooth and clean, get through the race, and then see where I ended up at the end, and kind of was just stuck with Ross. Was hoping to be able to make a move there on the last lap down Dottinger, and because it seemed like I was a little bit faster there, but just made a little mistake headed on there and wasn't able to quite get there.
What made this race so tricky to you, in your opinion, especially since with the Nurburgring it brings a ton of challenges, obviously?
Yeah, I've had kind of mixed results here, so I wanted to try and turn that around. Like last year when we were here, I kind of wrecked with the Porsche Cup and just wanted to build a more stable setup and make sure I finished it first, and then, as I said, see where I'm at the end. And definitely had some good battle there with Ross, and lap traffic was also pretty good and getting out of the way, letting us battle there at the end.
Indeed, it was today. And the next race is the Indianapolis 500. Your thoughts on going to the Brickyard?
That one's kind of been, we've been decent. Maybe not always the fastest car on track, but last year was definitely a lot of fun. I think the new damage model this year might change some of that and how the race ends up running. So we'll see what our pace looks like. I'm sure we're going to get started here pretty quick on working on that setup and getting it to handle well. And hopefully I can keep the car clean for most of it, if not the entire race. I kind of end up having some bad luck right at the end and not able to finish where I've been running.
Indeed. Anyone you want to thank for your run today?
I thank all the guys, TFR Grizzly, and our sponsors, TFR Lab, Infinity Decals, Envision, TeamSpeak, all the other sponsors that we got going on. Just thank you for all your support.
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, guys.
Joshua Wolf coming home with the podium finish today in the Porsches. I'd like to thank him, Ross Banfield, Dallas Pataska, along with Tim Klassens and Sakowicz for taking the time to speak with us for post-race interviews. And Christian, on that note, what are your final thoughts on this one and how things played out today?
Well, I was interested to see the strategy battle, obviously, that we had in GT4, and despite kind of all the classes having not a massive turnout, we still had pretty good battles for the lead in all of them, with the exception of 911 Cup, where Dallas Pataska just kind of drove away from everybody. But it was good to see that we still had some good battles out there. I would have liked to seen a bit more interaction with traffic, with more cars out there as a whole. But overall, I think, yeah, we had a pretty good race. Everybody did a good job to stay out of trouble, and I think everybody who won their class really had to work for it, even if they didn't necessarily have to directly race anybody. It's just a challenge getting around this place.
Now, I'm curious on this thought as well. You're racing later on tonight in the American region. What are your expectations for what we should see from you when you hit the track in a few hours?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be in GC4, I'm going to be running the BMW, and I'm hoping that I'll be quite competitive when I do so. I felt pretty good about it in practice earlier this week, and I've got a decent number of laps on the car, obviously leading up to a special event and whatnot, so pretty comfortable with it. Qualifying, a little bit unknown, because it's not really the kind of thing I actually focus on too much, especially not for a race like this, so that's probably just going to be one of those where wherever we fall out, but definitely race pace. I've got a good idea as to what I'm going to do, and yeah, I hope we put on a good show.
Should be interesting indeed later on. Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's exciting action from the Nurburgring. We'd also like to thank the Major Series for organizing this amazing series with all the action you see at the various different types of racetracks. We'd also like to take the time to thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed up on screen. Additional thanks to Jude Lawan, who provides the wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to the team today, in Christian, and Peter, and in Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.stormvy.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so you don't miss a moment here at the Global Sim Racing Channel. The next race for this series heads off to the Brickyard. It's the Indianapolis 500-mile race, and it takes place on May the 16th. Coverage will start at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to tune in. That is 3:15 GMT. And don't forget, the Majors American region takes place later on tonight. That will start at approximately 7:45 Eastern Time. Be sure to catch that here on GSRC. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on the screen, so be sure to check those out and mark them down in your calendar. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.